Well, let us begin. So I would like to call to order the Tuesday, January 17th, 2023 meeting of the South Burlington City Council. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tim, you want to start that, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There we go. Okay. Second item is instructions and exiting in case of an emergency.
Great, thank you. So for those in the room, there are two doors at the back of the auditorium. You can go out either side and then to the left or the right to get out. For those participating remotely, thank you for joining us. If you would like to speak tonight, you can turn your camera on or indicate to me in the chat that you would like to, and the chair will call on you. Otherwise, we are not monitoring the chat for content. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Item 3, agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of items? Seeing none, okay, we'll move on to comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. I don't see anyone in the audience who would make a comment. Is there anyone at home? All right. Okay. Are you interested? Is that Frank? Are you interested in making a comment on something not on the agenda? Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure. So we'll move on to item 5, counselors' announcements and reports on committee assignments and the city manager's report. Tim, do you?
Sure. So last week I attended the Economic Development Committee meeting and also the Energy Committee. And today I attended the Pension Advisory Committee meeting, and you will be hearing from the SCI representative and also Eric Shate from Northern. Is that the name of the company? The actuarial person. So thanks.
Okay. Megan?
No, I have nothing to report. I'll have more to report at our next meeting.
All righty. And the only thing, well, I have 2 meetings that I went to. One was the Natural Resources and, what is it? Conservation Committee meeting, and I also attended the CCTV meeting. And now I'm here. So that's all I have to share.
Oh, those were all today.
What?
Those meetings were all today?
No, they were last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no. It works pretty well. Okay. Jesse, do you want to give it your report?
Sure. Texting Paul to come down because you guys are flying.
Oh.
So actually, I only have a few updates for you as well this evening. Our communications union district that voters approved us joining in on the November ballot has officially been convened with our partner municipalities who joined on. We had our first board meeting about a week and a half ago where we adopted bylaws. Just for the community's reminder, this is the group that will allow us specifically in Chittenden County to do that last mile connection. So we have pretty good coverage. We're interested in duplicative coverage, but through the standing up of the CUD, we'll have access to state and federal dollars to do that last mile connection. In South Burlington, we have 7,143 folks who are already served by broadband and 22 who are not. So really, we're targeting those 22.
2,200 or 22 people?
22 home properties.
Wow.
We are in a much more privileged position than a lot of the state. Once this gets up and going and there is a plan forward, I would suggest to the council that we put out a request to the community to see if others wanted to serve as representatives to the CUD like we do to CCRPC or things like that. So more to come on that front, but it's off and rolling. If people want information about that organization, all of our agendas and information is hosted on the regional planning website.
Oh, CCRPC.
Yep.
Okay.
Last week, we swore in 3 new police officers who are now in our 3-week field training program and will go to the 115th Academy on February 6th. They are fantastic candidates, and we're excited to see kind of that rolling investment in new police officers going to the academy. We also welcomed a new dispatcher, Caitlin Howard, who we brought on from the state's PSAP dispatch service. So she brings a lot of experience with her, which we're really excited about, and celebrated the promotion of 2 sergeants. And then finally, I just want to remind the council that on next Monday, on the 23rd, we have our steering committee meeting. Right before that, we'll have a special council meeting where you will hold your public hearing on the education impact fees, and then we'll go right into the steering committee meeting.
Is that at 6:30 or 7?
The special council meeting starts at 6:30.
6:30, and then the steering is at 7. Okay. And then, is it at the police department?
No, it's here.
Oh, it's here. Okay.
You want to host, Sean? Sure. It's scheduled to be here.
I have that in my calendar, so for some reason, I thought you had said that. Tom, I'm sorry, since I didn't see your cheery little face, I didn't ask if you had anything to report. First week,
Nothing to report.
Want to tell the world what wonderful committees you're on and stuff?
Sure. I was reappointed to Transportation as the Vice Chair, and I was also very excited to be appointed to Senate Finance.
Great. Well, those are 2 good committees. Okay.
That's all I've got.
All right, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. There are 5 items: the disbursements, approving minutes from December 19th, accepting the easement deed for the community center access and the Market Street access public roadway easement from the South Burlington School District, and the easement deed Market Street from Allard Square. Approve request to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission for their FY24 Unified Planning Program. I think we've, 5 requests? Is that right? Something like that. And then lastly, approve the acceptance of Baycrest Drive, Irish Farm Road, Haymaker Lane, and Harbor Ridge Road as city streets.
So I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay. We're all set with those roads?
Yes.
Okay. All right, because sometimes we've been asked.
We've been plowing them all this time, or no?
Tom, you want to come up?
We would have heard if we haven't been, probably.
Well, somebody would have been plowing them.
Well, yeah.
Good evening.
The city.
Hi, good evening.
Tom DePietro, Director of Public Works. Yes, we have actually been maintaining these roads for a little while now. It was more of a paperwork process to finish it up, and it's a portion of some of those roads you listed. I think the information is in your packet, but
Okay.
Thanks.
All righty. So if there's no questions or discussion, if you're ready for the vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, so that's 4-0, and the consent agenda is adopted.
So
We're a little early for the Warren public hearing.
I would recommend you skip over 8, 7, 8, 9, and go to items 10 and 11, and Paul Connor is here to walk you through those.
Okay, so we'll move to item 10, which is receiving an update on the comprehensive plan outreach plan. Going to be busy.
We sure are. Hey, folks, Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. So we're entering the, as Chair really just said, the busy point with the comprehensive plan. We're really excited. Our city planner, Kelsey, has been working with all of the committee liaisons as well as the committees themselves, getting information out to them in the last couple of months. We have hired Joe Segali to be a professional facilitator for us for 11 public meetings that we're going to be hosting in February and March, specifically on the comprehensive plan. as talked about with the Planning Commission, the way that we've divvied it up is that there are going to be 4 that are focused on geography. So the northwest part of the city, the city center and Kennedy Drive corridor, the southwest and the southeast. And then there are going to be 7 topic-based ones that go along sort of major themes of issues in our communities, and also generally align with the statewide planning goals that we need to make sure that we've addressed all the topics of. So we're going to be hosting each of those. Today, in fact, we met with the liaisons and chairs of just about all the committees with our facilitator to walk through the process that's going to happen. In each one, there's going to be a little overview of what is the comprehensive plan, what's its purpose, what does it do for the next 10 years for us, and then talk a little bit about some of the things we know in terms of the city having adopted a climate action plan, about what we have done in past years in terms of conservation and zoning and things like that, and then what we anticipate in terms of future growth based on the forecasts that have been done for the school district by McKimmon Demographics and our historic trends. So things that we sort of can expect to see in our community to help shape the conversation. And then the facilitator is going to gather feedback on these topics using the city's comprehensive plan goals that you talked about with the Planning Commission back last fall to sort of, again, give it all a framework and gather pretty broad community feedback. We're expecting that people will bring all sorts of ideas. They're going to be hosted by committees, but it's really, this is the opportunity for the public to weigh in. And we expect that, the nature of this work is that everything is cross-cutting. So somebody may choose to show up at the City Center Kennedy and talk about transportation issues in their area, and that's perfectly fine. And then somebody may come to the transportation topic-specific one and share a similar thought, and that's fine. That's why we're having a consistent facilitator and staff attending. We're going to pair this with a bunch of outreach, the first of which is going to be in this week's other paper, letting folks know about these events. We are going to be doing an online poll to sort of kick off all of this through the city news. The poll will ask some really basic questions around the comprehensive plan goals and vision. Its primary purpose, as our moderator and former professor of statistics would say, Vince Baldock, oftentimes a poll is just to get people's minds going. So we're using that as an introduction to this work. Committees are then going to be invited after the public input to gather their thoughts about what they've seen, what they've heard, and share additional feedback to planning staff. They've already been invited to share feedback on what they see are some key issues. We're then going to roll that into the work over the next few months of developing the first draft of the plan in the various chapters, bring those to the Planning Commission, give the chance for the committees on the various different subject areas to provide feedback, and then pull it all together come late spring and into the summer. So we're very excited by all this. We have invited the Planning Commission members, and they have agreed to have to try to have at least one at every one of these different sessions, and we've encouraged them to please feel free to attend ones that they're passionate about, but attend one that they know less about as well. And they were very interested in doing that, and we extend the same invitation to any counselors that are able to attend any of these. They're going to be all held in room 301 of the City Hall and online with a consistent go-to meeting link that's going to be the same one for everyone, so it makes it a lot easier for folks to keep track of which one they want to attend or ones and be able to provide their feedback. So that's where we are. We're really excited, and this is launching into our next 10 years of policymaking.
Right. Questions? Comments?
Will there be planning commissioners at each of these public outreach meetings?
There will be,
or
yeah.
will they rely on the facilitators to report back on the public input?
So the facilitator is going to be doing facilitating. That's their primary work. They'll debrief a little bit with staff, but really they're there to keep the discussion going. Staff is going to be also there, taking notes and debriefing with one another and with the facilitator afterwards. Planning Commission members are really, they were very interested in attending, and our primary goal with that is for them to just be hearing what is being said by the public. The committees will also be at all but one of the topic-based ones are hosted by one or more committees. We've asked in a couple of cases for a couple of committees to get together because the topic areas are similar. So we're having the public art, the recreation and parks, and the common area for dogs committee all together to host the session about community amenities and culture. And on the other spectrum, we're asking a few committees to stretch their mission a little bit. So, for example, the Bike Ped Committee is going to be hosting the subject of transportation. And they understand that they're a Bike Ped Committee, but as far as the public is concerned, the public may want to give feedback on whether it's buses or cars or trucks or rail, I suppose, or Bike Ped. And so they've agreed to host that, which makes it a little bit more clear for the community and gives the committees as well maybe some feedback and input on subjects that they don't always hear. So, yeah.
Okay, so it will be more of the policy committees that will report back to staff as they.
Well, right. So staff will be there to gather our own notes, and then Kelsey has laid out a schedule for each of those committees and when any feedback that they want to provide based on what they've heard needs to come to her so that she can be incorporating that into the very first draft that goes to the Planning Commission. And that's all been laid out in a schedule for each of the committees.
Thanks.
And then we have one topic, I've forgotten the title that we gave it in the end. Public Safety, Public Works, Basic Needs, which does not have a committee, but it's really all the things that our amazing partners in the public, out in public safety do, what Public Works does that isn't necessarily roads. And then we added the word basic needs is really a bit of a catch-all for folks to share, an opportunity for folks to share what they're hearing or what they're experiencing in our community that may not fit easily with a committee. So if somebody were to say, you know, I would really love to see greater times of opening of the food shelf, or other service, you know, greater partnerships with Howard Center, or things like that, that there's an opportunity for folks that we haven't made the boxes so tight that people can't provide feedback on those subjects. We felt that those are, you know, we know that they're going on in the community, and we'd love people to share any and all thoughts that they have.
And just because it's budget night, I will add that's probably about 75% of our budget in that one conversation. Minor detail, core municipal government.
And we put it first.
Okay, Tim?
More importantly, at each of these meetings with the public, will there be refreshments?
Well, it depends on whether you choose to attend at home or in person. If you come in person, you will have a selection of refreshments that we have provided. If you're attending at home, it's really up to you and the negotiations within your own household.
And then,
Okay, so did you hear that, Tom Chittenden? Refreshments if you show up.
so what do you envision as the, so we have a current comprehensive plan, right? And there's a lot of good information in there that you want to retain, and some new stuff you want to add, and some things you want to tweak because things have changed, right? So is it a scrap redo, or is it a take the existing and add a few sections and change some sections? And
the way we've been talking about this, and this came up a little bit in the Joint Planning Commission Council meeting as well, is really looking at this as building on the 2016 comprehensive plan. The 2016 plan was a pretty thorough rewrite, so I would, you know, describe this as doubling down or supercharging the 2016 plan. So the areas which were identified are now being said more clearly. The direction of the city the feedback that we've gotten so far has been, that the city's generally headed in the right direction. So now let's refine these things, make our objectives even more measurable for the next 8 years and advance. And I think that that's reflected in the discussion that the Council and Planning Commission had around what are the key goals. They're refined, but they didn't change direction. If you're hearing otherwise, we'd love to hear it at the sessions too.
No, I'm impressed with your plan and outreach, and I hope that the public responds and really takes the opportunities. There certainly are enough of them
Yes.
to tell us what they think. And I might add, I think there's probably a majority on the Planning Commission right now who worked on the current. There are at least 4, right?
3 or 4, and certainly, yeah, at least 3, maybe 4. I think Michael came in just at the end, so he might be the 4th one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that's good. There's some continuity,
Certainly,
and then there's
and our
some
newest member,
fresh
Donna.
perspectives, which are always.
Yeah, and our newest member, Donna Lieben's been involved with the community for a long time, and so she was certainly aware of the last one. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's continuity and new, invigorating energy both, which is great.
Well, great. Well, thank you. It's a lot of work. A lot of work. Okay. Let's see. What else can we do? Item 11, okay, receive an update on the Auclair parcel.
Yep, Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. So it's laid out in a memo to you now I guess 2 summers ago, the council voted on a second or an additional contribution towards the conservation of the project of about $309,000. So that action took place. Since that time, we've provided council with a couple of updates. The parties are getting ready, specifically the Vermont Land Trust, to close on the conservation of the bulk of Parcel B, which is the west side of Heinsberg Road, north of Cheese Factory. And we had felt that it would be prudent to put in writing in a public forum enumerating what exactly is being accomplished with this conservation, essentially. So we are inviting the council's action to essentially authorize the city manager to release those funds, and we're providing that documentation about exactly what what this conservation is achieving for all parties.
Okay.
So do we need to?
So in the memo from Kelsey, linked to this agenda item, there are 2 proposed actions. Paul, you want to walk through those?
Oh, right.
Just need to get them up in front of me, excuse me.
Do you want me to start?
We can read them if that would
You know, have them right here.
be helpful. The first one is allocate the remaining $309,033 from the city's open space fund toward the VLT acquisition of the conservation easement on Parcel B, conditional on the execution of an acceptable right of first refusal on the so-called excluded area of 13.41 acres of Parcel B.
So, can I ask a question about that again?
Yeah.
Because I remember when we voted on this, and I think I voted against it just at that time. But appropriating the 309,000. I voted for the 0.6 mil, but
Yeah,
not for
yeah.
the 3. But that's okay. I still support this. So what is the excluded area again?
So the excluded area is at the very northern extent of the property,
Right.
and this is it was acknowledged from the very beginning that both to achieve the objectives of Bread and Butter Farm, to be able to provide for some level of housing, hopefully farm worker housing, and also, frankly, to make all of the numbers work. The value of all the contributions from all the different entities, NRCS, the city, the state grant funds, could achieve conservation on the overwhelming majority of the property, but not the entirety of the property. So this is the excluded area that could be used to essentially become the farm hub. The way that so in addition to that, the way that the NRCS easements work, that using the federal funds, is you have to lay out very specifically which land will be conserved and which land can be used for anything, including whether it's farm worker housing, but it also could be a food hub, or it could be point of sale, that kind of thing, and that needs to be excluded. So that's what this is achieving.
Right.
The update that is discussed in here and that is part of that motion is that we have worked with the various parties to create a right of first refusal for the city for that 13 acres, and that's something that had been discussed with council as a possible item. It was not committed to at that time, but given that there's still some fluidity in the ownership, this is something that we advocated for, and we felt would put the city in a solid position if, for whatever reason, it's taking a left turn that was unexpected by the city. So that's the one new addition, is that you are gained a right of first refusal if you choose.
And that would be right of first refusal to purchase the property, right?
Correct. The 13 acres, yes.
Right.
Yep.
Do we need to vote on these separately? Because we
I'll
can,
do-
if there aren't
I
other
think if you're fine
questions.
with both of them, that's, as long as they're both read into the
Right.
record, then
Okay,
that's
well
fine.
then, the second one is approving the memorandum documenting the conservation, agriculture, recreational, and other public benefit outcomes of the city's total approximately $915,000 funding.
So I'll move to approve both proposed actions that you just read out loud recently.
And I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Tom, do you have any questions? We have a map up, so I can't see you.
It's not sharing this.
You can bring it back.
Not? No, I guess not. So if there's no further comment or question, I'm so glad we're almost done.
Us
I
too.
am. I drive by there a lot and I see what they're doing, and it's fun, and I'm proud of our action as a community to preserve this. So, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Tom, are you going to vote, or any opposed? Looks like it's just 3-0 with 2 absent. Okay.
Thank you for your time.
I climbed the Mount Everest of South Burlington 2 days ago. That's the dirt pile near your house at Cider Mill,
Yes.
Edgewood. Right?
Yes.
And I could see your house from up there. It's not the highest point, though. I think that the ledge where the
Yes,
farm was, I think
yeah.
that's even higher.
Yeah, that is. According to Tom, that is the highest
I
point
think-
in South Burlington.
As we've
Yeah.
been told several times.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
So it is 7 o'clock, so we can now go back to item 7, our warned meeting, a public hearing on the FY24 All Funds Budget and Capital Improvement Plan. So shall I make a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
And a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the public hearing is open. Do you want to do any setting the table?
So, in the interest of public disclosure for folks who may be watching this in the future, since we don't have a whole lot of engagement tonight or online, I would like to run through a presentation just quickly so you all are reminded of what you're voting on tonight. Also, out of respect for your process and in thanks for the time that you have spent over the last 2 months on hearing this budget and asking great questions about it, I did want to invite the leadership team to be here tonight. So we have obviously our wonderful finance director, Martha Machar, who really is the architect of this budget. We have Paul Connor, the director of planning and zoning, Alana Blanchard, the community development director, Sean Burke, the police chief, Steve Flock, the fire chief, Colin McNeil, the city attorney, Jennifer Murray, the library director, Martha Lyons, the tax and assessing director, Greg Gando, the fiscal plant director, Daisy Brayton, our HR director, and Tom DePietro, our public works director. Online, we also have Holly Reese, our parks and recreation director, and Mike Mott, our IT director. We also have lots of Tom's leadership team who is also here with us tonight. So we have Marissa and Adam and Bob and Erica, of course, in the room as well. And I think I've hit everyone. Did I hit everyone? Excellent. Good job, team. Thanks for being here. So again, they are here to express their thanks to you all for the time you spent on the budget presentations. Oh, and Dave Wheeler just joined us as well. And also to answer any questions that you may have during your final discussion. So this is what I'm going to run through tonight. I'm going to do it very quickly. You all have seen this information a number of times. It's also for those who are watching at home or watching afterwards, linked here off of our main budget website. And we will be going over this many more times again before town meeting day as well. So you heard about the challenges that we experienced in building this budget. We are at certainly once in thus far in my career, high inflation and COLA rates. I think we are all experiencing that across our community. We continue to come out from our lean COVID years, and we really focused as a leadership team on what we needed to do to maintain our service delivery to the community as we continue to grow as a community. We've made a number of key assumptions to develop this budget. We are assuming a 1.75% growth in our grand list. That's the total assessed values of all of our properties in South Burlington. I do want to note really good news for us as a community. 1% of that is in our citywide grand list. Almost 10% of that growth is in our city center grand list. So the investment we have made in public infrastructure in our TIF district and in our city center is realizing that level of growth. We're also including the ARPA step-downs we have previously talked about and other individual budget items as laid out here. So for the goals that we are realizing as part of this budget, and what I'm specifically talking about today is the leadership team recommended budget that the council indicated support for at your last meeting. So with this budget, we are really focusing on ensuring those core municipal services support our community expectations. We are meeting those inflation and COLA rates. We are focusing on maintaining our parks, reinvesting in our police department and fire department, investing in our capital improvement program. So we are incrementally investing general fund dollars in our capital needs every year, and restoring a GIS data analyst staff position that was eliminated during COVID. So during the budget presentations, you heard about a lot of different service needs to maintain those core operations. You heard from Public Works about our ability, our need to grow our ability to maintain not only our parks, which we will invest in this year, but also our ability to maintain our roadway system. We have about 20 new miles of road in the last 22 years and have not grown our staff as a result. You heard from our police department about the need to restore officers that were previously underfunded to, again, meet those community service needs, restore specialized assignments for our police officers, and train for that future succession planning. So this budget includes investing in one additional restored funded police officer position, as well as restoring the deputy chief position in the police department.
Could I just clarify that the underfunded, the police being underfunded, it wasn't necessarily the council?
It was, that's absolutely correct, Councilor Emery. That was a financial decision that was made during lean COVID years to have the finances of the city reflect the operational staffing realities that we were facing at the time as we struggled to recruit officers. It wasn't an intentional unfunding of the police department. But now we have to build that tax capacity back into the budget. Thank you for that clarification.
Good point.
Good point. Right, Chief? Thumbs up. You also heard from the fire department about our need to restore the 30th firefighter position in order to maintain our minimum staffing without mandated overtime, as well as invest in our second ambulance in the city. Right now, we operate one, as we are seeing those numbers continue to creep up. And right now, 23% of our 911 calls are answered by professionals from other communities and other organizations. And then finally, you heard about our need to incrementally continue to invest in our capital improvement plan. As you can see in this chart, our property tax capacity to fund CIP over the last, 7 years, has fluctuated pretty significantly. And what that means is we are not every year as costs increase, incrementally investing in our ability to keep up with maintaining and improving our infrastructure. So this year we'll start our level funding and increasing that every year. So this is the proposed FY24 budget that the leadership team is presenting. It accomplishes those goals that I just outlined. It is a 2-year plan. It maintains the $800,000 of general fund funding to the TIF capital reserve. And it has a 5.75% impact on the tax rate, or just over 2.5 pennies. So for the average condo owner in the city, that's an additional $78 next year. And the single family homeowner, that's an additional $117. So that's the general fund budget. I do want to call out a number of different funding streams that if you approve this tonight, you will also be approving. We've had lots of conversation recently about ARPA. So with this budget, you are continuing that plan to step down our investment in salaries and capital from ARPA. And you see that outlined here, where those dollars will go both in staff and CIP funding in the out years. This will have remaining ARPA funds available of $2 million for the council to discuss. And of course, you talked last week about using that ARPA fund to fund our city's commitment to climate action. That vote is not part of the vote tonight, but I don't want to lose the community commitment to implementing our climate action plan here. And then, of course, if approved tonight, you will also be approving our 10-year capital improvement plan. Here you see some of the specific things that are highlighted in that amazing 150-page document, which I highly recommend everyone go through with a fine-tooth comb. It's very exciting. A lot of ways we are investing in our community. As I said, we're investing $450,000 of new general fund capacity into our capital projects with this budget, and we'll continue to do that for the years to come. Always want to include what is not included in this budget. So not included in this year's budget is funding for the recreation center or specific funding for regional dispatch, although we do think we have other solutions for that. And then, of course, with the approval of this budget, the council is also approving the enterprise funds budgets. These are budgets that aren't specifically brought to the taxpayers to vote on town meeting day, but are approved by the council. So the stormwater fund includes a 1.64% rate increase, or $1.44 for the year. You can see the projects that will specifically fund in the coming year, as well as the amazing level of grants that Dave and Tom and the team have been able to bring into our community that have really been able to maintain those low rates. In our water and stormwater funds, we have underinvested in infrastructure for a number of years. So with the upcoming Bartlett Bay wastewater treatment plant bond issue that is on the ballot as well as future water capacity, we do need to increase these rates this year. So this includes on the wastewater side an 8.34% rate increase, or about $30 for the average ratepayer. And you see here where we stand as compared to other our neighboring communities' water rates. We are the lowest. Same on the water fund. It's about an 8.5% rate increase, or $23 next year. And again, we are at the lower end of that capacity. This is anticipating and being part of this rate increase is being driven by an anticipated bond vote next town meeting day. for additional storage, water storage capacity that we will need to keep up with our community's growth. You heard from Erica about our pennies for path funding stream. So that's the 1 cent on the property tax rate for pennies for paths, and how those funds, about 400,000, will be allocated in FY24 and then continuing in future years. Really important to note that with this investment that the community has made, 86% of our residential buildings are within a 1/10 of a mile of a shared use path, which is great for meeting some of our other community goals. Similarly, on the open space front, again, this is a penny on the tax rate that we have here in South Burlington. You see how we are proposing to use those dollars this year. With your vote tonight, those will also be approved. Fun fact here is 68% of our residential buildings are within a 1/4 mile of a park and open space, which is great, but obviously work to continue to be done. With this budget, you'd also be approving the use of our special funds. So we have 25 other special funds across the city, which total almost $10 million of spending in this fiscal year, and you've seen those. Those are all linked on our website as well, so if people are watching and really wondering what those 25 special funds are, you can dive into the detail on our website. You've already approved the 2 bond votes to go onto the town meeting day ballot. That's our $15 million bond vote for our final tax increment financing district authorization to incur debt, broken out into those 4 projects. And of course, our $33.8 million bond vote for our Bartlett Bay wastewater treatment plant facility. So with approval of the warning tonight, you will be putting those on the ballot. Almost done, I promise. So I think it's always important to talk about what are the remaining emerging issues. So again, this is a 2-year operations budget proposal, which means this is a pretty significant increase this fiscal year, and we'll have a hopefully not quite as matching impact in FY25 to add capacity and incrementally invest in our capital. We are seeing significant transitions in our executive team continuing, which may impact other decisions. Regional dispatch is something we continue to focus on. We do have that anticipated bond vote in 2024. We are not currently funding a recreation center, which I know that there's still some community interest in. We are in active negotiations with our health clinic, so that structure could change going into FY24. Our fire collective bargaining agreement does expire at the end of FY24, so that will have an impact on next year's budget potentially. And we are certainly seeing wage pressures from our surrounding municipalities, especially in public safety. So more to come on those issues as we get into FY24. So with your approval tonight, this is the community engagement process that we will undertake over the next couple of weeks to ensure that our community is educated and informed about what will be on the town meeting day ballot. Of course, we will meet with you all will meet with the steering committee on the 23rd. We will be doing the town meeting day presentation on January 31st, and then that will be rebroadcast. And then we plan, Alana and Tom and I plan to do 3 different informational meetings over the course of February and early March. Really hyping the Valentine's Day Love Your City budget informational meeting right before your dinner reservations. It's going to be fantastic. We are doing those from 6 to 7 so people can come to an informational meeting and then go to a comp plan meeting. So lots of ability to get your voices heard and stay informed. And then, of course, town meeting day polls are open from 7 to 7. That is my presentation. Thank you for allowing me to run through it.
Thank you. So now it's the public's turn. Are there any comments? Frank, would you come up to the mic, please, and make sure the green light is bright green. You have to push the little button so we can hear you.
I just have a question about process.
Would you please,
I'm sorry, my name is Frank Kochman. I live on Hadley Road. Right.
Thank you.
My only question is about process. It's a very ambitious public information schedule you've laid out. Does that lend itself to modification of the budget between now and town meeting day, or are you simply explaining and what you see is what you get on town meeting day? That's the question.
Well, I think we're always able to make some changes. I think we have had a lot of conversations and believe that this is the right budget for the community. And we're looking to both educate you and hear your comments. Do you have anything else to add?
So I would only add that with the council's approval tonight, the general fund budget for FY24 will be set pending voter approval on town meeting day, so that can't change. However, there are many aspects of the non-general fund budget that the council can change mid-year or redirect funding mid-year. So certainly always going to the community and educating, as the council chair says, is part of that. What are the future policy decisions that the council will make with the dollars allocated?
And Frank, we did have some council conversations about our goals and expectations for the budget to give the management or leadership our thoughts about that, on which they acted and presented this. And whenever we did that, the public was able to make comment if they so choose. Not too many did, but that's kind of the process. It's not a public hearing, but we like to hear from the public through the whole process, which began last December.
Actually, what the question was directed at was not so much anything programmatic at all, but rather trying to avoid, I mean, what I'm struck by is the tax increases are going to be pretty hefty this year.
Uh-huh.
And if it's just up or down on town meeting day, I would prefer that the council sniff the air and avoid a series of up or down votes on successively reducing budgets. That's all. It was a numbers question, not a program question, right? And I'm just curious. I'm not here to suggest anything in particular. I was wondering what the process would be, and that's my underlying concern. I hate to see budgeting and dragged out.
Mm-hmm.
It's helpful to have certainty as soon as you can, and if that means adjusting up front rather than going back to the drawing board after a failed vote, I'd prefer to see that. That's all. Just a thought.
I would too, but I think in our process, we have been sniffing. And I think we had additional thoughts or concerns that both the public and council members brought to the fore that are not reflected in this budget because they were too costly. So I appreciate your comments and sensitivities to that, but I think the council feels pretty strongly that this is a really appropriate and reasonable budget request, even though it is 2.5 cents, and that's usually higher than we go. But there's expectations that we've heard for the last 2 years in terms of, I think, services that the public expects and wants. And I think this budget reflects that in as lean and careful a way as we could, yet.
Well, I think it's a real balancing act. I mean, every budget is a balancing act, right? And this year is different in particular. I mean, in the past, we didn't have to vote on the city budget if it was less than 3% increase or something to do with the CPI. Remember that? And then the charter got changed, and then we were allowed to vote on the city budget every year, right? Mm-hmm. The only budgets that have been voted down that I can remember was 2017 when the ed budget was voted down twice, but that was also in conjunction with, a process about changing the mascot name, if you remember that pretty clearly, right? And finally it passed on the third try. Right, big issue. So this year is a little bit different. Like as you were, I think you were talking about, there are a lot of things at play here. One is inflation, right? I mean, inflation hits everybody here when they go to the supermarket, and they can't believe that a dozen eggs is $5.99 to start with, $8.99 if you want the other ones, right? Okay, I'm going there right now. Sorry.
Price choppers is
But
less.
but you know we're all seeing increases in the price of your Vermont gas bill went up. I think your GMP bill went up a little bit. They probably are going to go for another one. You know, food is up, right? Fuel is up enormously, right? For this budget compared to a year ago, right? And then on top of that, there's the human capital, which we've really poured over and had a lot of feedback from, especially public safety and fire, where you know, the city expects services and we're glad to provide them, but then you have to turn around and look at the toll that it takes on the human lives that provide those services. And when they're working a lot of overtime, their quality of life suffers, you know. And so this budget takes those people into account and tries to add resources so that they get to spend more time with their families. So we're trying to be fair to everybody, including the voter. And normally we shoot for 3%, right? Now you got to go back 2 years and realize that we reappraised the whole city, right? And that was a shock because housing prices have went up through inflation following the pandemic. But through the grievance process, I think we pushed down all the outliers and tried to make it more level and more fair than it could have than it was when Tyler Technologies had the first whack at it, right? So we flattened that out. But then the grand list has grown, so we have more growth, more tax receipts, and then we have this TIF district right here, which is going to have an enormous impact as well. So the 5% to me, and we looked at 3 different sets of numbers. There was a number higher than this one, and we said we should probably stick in the middle of the road for now and stay at 5 because it's a little bit less painful, right? So does that summarize, I think?
Yeah.
And I think it's important that you really stress the public safety, both police and fire, where we really need to invest in order to make sure that they are prepared to respond to our needs as a community. So I think that has to be stressed. We have grown tremendously as a community at a time when you know, it's very difficult to find police officers and firefighters, and we need to increase that personnel. We need to increase the force and our firefighter membership. Otherwise, we will lose police and firefighters, and then where will we be? So it's these are the choices that we were faced with.
I don't want to imply really any criticism of what you've been through. I don't envy the task. I'm just suggesting that well, perhaps this is a good warm-up for the next for all the public meetings. I hope it comes out that we have the budget at the appropriate time. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other public members who would like to share a comment or thought? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Come up, excuse me.
Little off my feet from back surgery, so.
It's all right. Hey, I
You're
can't
moving
walk.
pretty well.
I can't walk as fast as I used to either.
I take it this is on?
If the light is bright,
There we go.
okay.
My name's John Pfeiffer. I live in Willowbrook Lane. I wrote you folks a letter back in April of last year about a 911 call we made and mutual aid. And I appreciate your service, and I appreciate you supporting both Chief Burke and Chief Locke in their budget proposals. I fully support public safety. I've done it for 31 years. I agree with everything you're doing, but I just noticed tonight on one of your emerging issues is the ability to recruit and retain firemen and police officers. And I did a little online research. I just stayed in Chittenden County. The only police department that's currently offering hiring bonuses is Burlington. And I'm not proposing that. What I am proposing is that our HR department here in South Burlington look at options for a more robust recruitment and retention of that workforce. It's not an emerging issue, in my opinion. It's already here.
Well, yes.
And maybe it's just that's the way it was categorized on the slide. But the hours that the fire department puts in is ridiculous. Overtime doesn't fix anything. Actually, we're gonna lose more of them, I think, I'm afraid, if it wasn't for their dedication to stay. And I just wanted to come here tonight and thank you for what you do in supporting them. But I really think there should be more attention on that emerging issue of the recruitment and the retention.
Thank you very much, John. I think the council agrees with you, and I think that's why it was included as maybe emerging was the wrong verb, but we recognize that issue, and in this budget, we tried to address as best we could with hiring and paying for additional personnel, and recognizing that keeping it as an emerging issue, we haven't solved that problem. We recognize that we need to do what's in this budget, and we need to continue to really make the effort to recruit and retain the professionals that we have. We're very proud of what they have done in terms of the overtime and dealing with the fallout, I guess, of COVID and, not having as much budget as we would like. So I appreciate and your concern as well. It's a shared one.
And I've been a taxpayer here since 2005. I'm now on a retired fixed income. I went back to work part-time. So I appreciate, how much everything costs and your constraints and your competing priorities. But the number one function of government is public safety. And I think people have to realize that when the numbers that they're talking about, 22% of the time you're getting a mutual aid ambulance, the city, we're already there. And we can approve 5 more positions or 10 more positions, but unless we can get them, there's already a 2 or 3 year cycle of getting that new person on the ground working by themselves. And so if we don't start now, I'm afraid we're going to be back here next year with either a plateaued line on the workforce or lower. And that's just what I just wanted to bring up,
Thank you.
As a resident here in South Burlington.
Well, if I may be so bold, I would encourage you to write a letter to the editor that identifies that as an important issue, and that this budget doesn't fully resolve that, and we have to keep our eye on that ball. But they should definitely pass this budget, because if this gets cut, then we really are in a situation where we may lose more firefighters or police because we aren't supporting them enough.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Not here. I don't see any hands here. You're sure there's no one in the public? All right. We did a really good job, I guess, huh?
We, yeah.
Our fearless leader. Thank you. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
We'll move on to, Tom, did you want to make any comments?
Nope, thank you, though.
Okay. Number 8 is the budget discussion and approval of the general fund capital improvement plan and the enterprise fund budgets with
So-
directions to send it to the steering committee and the voters.
Yes. So if you have no additional changes you would like to see in what was presented, there are 3 votes that are required. There's 2 resolutions. The first resolution adopting and amending the capital improvement program. Second resolution approving the FY24 all funds budget as presented, including the ARPA allocations. And then with those two on this agenda item, the third, we would move to approve the warning on the next agenda item. Sorry,
Okay,
the
so-
package is so.
Right, so who would like to make,
Do I motion twice or?
it's three,
One,
it's
can
three.
do three.
If you could do the two different resolutions separately, so approve initially the resolution for the amending the capital improvement program first.
All right, so I move that we approve a resolution amending the capital improvement program for fiscal years 2024 to 2033.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay,
And I move that we approve a resolution adopting and warning the fiscal year 2024 city budget and enterprise funds, including the use of American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds.
Second.
any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So they pass. Do we have a third one?
And then the
Yes.
agenda item 9 is to approve with all of those included the 2023 town meeting day warning and ballot language in its entirety.
Do we have to read the whole thing?
No.
You want me to start now?
Post it
The
on
League
the
of Voters
website.
of.
It does include setting the public hearing for March 6th, the night before town meeting day at 6:30 in the evening. So that should be part of your motion.
Okay,
So I'll move that we approve the 2023 town meeting day warning and set the public hearing for March 6, 2023 at 6:30 PM. It will be here or at the middle school here, 180 Market Street.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great,
Th-
nice work.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, leadership team, for all of your work building this budget. Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, good job. They actually made the hard decisions, we just
Did make hard decisions.
make the final. Okay, wow, we are an hour and a half ahead of time.
We like you too much.
All right, is Mr. Capel gonna join us? Because the next item we have is the city pension asset update.
Yeah, I just emailed both of them that we were running ahead and
Oh.
if they were planning to be here, to
Okay,
be here.
great.
Dan will be here, I think, at 7:45.
All right, do you want to move down to item 14 then? Mm-hmm. That is, and we'll hear the pension people when they arrive. The pension people, yeah. Okay, item 14 then, consider and possibly approve an update to the purchasing policy. So Martha Machar. Yeah.
So Martha's gonna talk through these two policies, but just by way of introduction for both item 14 and 15, we are really trying to focus on our core operations policies and modernizing those. Those include both the finance policies, the personnel policies, and our code of ordinances. This is the start of a slew of these policy updates you will see coming before you. And I really want to thank Martha for her leadership in bringing these two policy changes, really policy updates to our existing policies forward to you tonight. Go for it.
So for the purchasing policy, last year during the audit process, there was a recommendation from our annual auditor that we should be updating our purchasing policy to include the current issuance by the Office of Management and Budget that does regularly issue regulations on how federal grants award should be managed when they are awarded, and our purchasing policy had not been updated, I believe, since 2014, and we needed to do that. It was also a recommendation by the state auditor, which audited one of our grants this year, and they recommended that we do the update so that our purchasing policy is current and our grant procurement processes are in line with the recommendation.
Okay, so all the red language is the new language?
New language.
It's all the new language, and the code used in those red line was the VLCT purchasing policy model, which is updated. We use that to mirror what those languages and also the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
has this purchasing policy already pre-existed and it's just being modified?
That's correct.
Okay. So I read through it and found a couple things I have questions about. Can I ask those now? They're not the red stuff. It's the regular, the previous non-red stuff.
Sure, go for the black. Or blue, or whatever.
So I didn't cut out the section that it's in, but shoot. So there's a section that says departments have direct access to any MRC. So it is the department's responsibility to track purchases so the department knows when a proposed purchase will overexpend a budget line. And then it goes on to say, if DCM agrees and the proposed overexpenditure is less than or equal to $10,000, the DCM may approve the PO. If the proposed expenditure is over $10,000, approval must be obtained from the DCM. Did you mean to, instead of the second one, if it's over 10,000, it should be the CM, not the DCM?
Yes, my read of that is should be the city
It-
manager.
Okay, so do you want me to highlight that typo to you? I can send you it.
No, I see it right
Oh,
here.
you see it?
Yep.
Okay. Because I was saying, well, why would they say it the same twice if it was over 10,000 or under 10,000? Because previously you had said if it was over 10,000, the city manager has to approve. The other thing that I was puzzled about was section 4, the vendor selection criteria. Just some of the wording of it, like line C, it says do so promptly or within timeline specified. It just seems like the wording of that could be improved. You know, that the bidder has to, you know, it's not a complete sentence, right? So it doesn't really tell me what, I think I know what you mean there. And on line E, it says the quality, availability, and adaptability of the service or product being purchased and the ability of the vendor to, and it just stops there.
Tim, I'm sorry, I've now
That was
lost
E,
you.
line
What
E.
section are you on?
Section 4, line E,
For what,
the vendor selection criteria.
It's the second
Not the
page of the
grant.
document.
Oh, way back. So section 4, vendor selection,
yeah.
E.
Does that go into C?
Backwards.
Does it go into C? And to do so promptly? I mean, and even with G, the contractor and consultant used by that department. I mean,
So it was just a little wordsmithing on C, doesn't really, it's not a complete sentence, and so the rest of them try to be. Line E, it ends with the word to, and I'm not sure, I mean, I know what you're trying to say, but that,
yeah,
it sounds like
Megan's
you
right.
want to
E
say
and F
something
should be the
else and you
same
don't,
line.
you don't finish it, so.
Yeah, E and F are the same line. They
and
shouldn't
B
be
and
sub-
C too? And G and H?
Oh, so E and F should be just line E?
Just line E.
I see, okay. I
Yep.
didn't even notice that, thank you.
Yep, we can easily fix those.
Okay. And that's all I found, but I could have looked even closer, but those stood out to me.
I believe those are great catches and the result of taking documents we only have in PDF and wording them.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And just our eyes missed that but good catches, happy to fix.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So are we ready to approve the purchasing policy changes
As amended.
as amended? As further amended from Tim? As presented and with further amendment? We ready? Okay, I would,
Well, could I just
Oh.
ask, I didn't see where Tim's first change was. What
Oh, the
page of the
first one?
document is?
It's
It was, I didn't,
it's way
it's
down.
below, it's the next page from where he just
Yeah.
was.
yeah,
Yeah.
So if you go to purchase orders, and then it's the paragraph 3 down from the alphabetized lines that say where departments have direct access.
Okay,
It's the last sentence of that.
okay. Yes, got
So
it,
it should be
got it. Thank you.
the city manager, not
Now
the
I'm ready to
There it is.
go, yeah. The only thing is
from $10,000 to $25,000, A, that's letter A, a PO must be sent prior to purchase. AP will send the PO to DCM for approval. So over $10,000 to $25,000. I don't, right? It's over $25,000 that it's sent to the city manager for final decision. That's C.
Trying to tell Kathy with Colin. Martha, did you follow what Megan was saying?
No, I
Right,
missed
because
it.
A says that it's sent to the deputy city manager from $10,000 to $25,000. C says greater than $25,000, that's when it's sent to the city manager, right? And that final line says if the proposed expenditure is over $10,000 with, could go up to millions and however more than that, approval must be obtained from the DCM.
Well,
So,
we're changing that to the,
but
city
over
manager.
10 to 25, it goes to the DCM.
Yeah, I think it's just missing a final sentence there about if the expenditures between, I think actually we could probably get rid of that whole section since it is outlined above in A, B, and C.
I just want to be sure that it's not something different. Because the logic,
I don't know what.
Well, I didn't have a problem with purchase orders A, B, and C. It's down lower in that paragraph that says departments have direct access to any MRC. And it's the last sentence in that paragraph.
So the
Because-
way our purchasing policies work is anything that is up to 10,000 can be approved by
That-
the deputy city manager. But if it is 25,000, that's when it goes to the city manager for approval. But
final.
up to 25, yes.
right. That paragraph has to do with over expenditures.
Right.
So it's separate from the ABC because
It
it's
is.
not an over expenditure, it's just a purchase.
Right.
So my reading of that paragraph is if there is an over expenditure, if you exceed, the allotted amount that you're to spend, you have to go through the deputy city manager. It seems like it's a separate process or a separate,
It is, yes.
situation.
Yep, it is a difference. So approval of the current purchase orders as approved in the budget is separate from when that approved amount needs to go over or is going to go over. If let's say the budget line is approved to be 10,000, but the actual expenses can be beyond 10,000, then if it is up to 10,000, deputy city manager can approve, but beyond that, it goes to the city manager for approval.
So you would change that to the city manager in that paragraph,
the
that
final
line?
sentence.
The final three characters, strike the D, right?
So the final sentence should say if the proposed expenditure is over $10,000, approval must be obtained from the city manager.
Because it's still
This is
under.
an overage, not what the,
Yeah, this is a different,
Right.
it's a
Category.
different. I mean, this would be $10,000 over an approval that was $500,000. And then if it's over $10,000, it's bumped up to you to say, yeah, that's okay, or no, it's not.
Yeah, we'll change that.
You would put it before the city manager?
Anything that's above 10,000
Yeah.
will go to the city manager for approval.
there's just a lot
Colin,
of
did you
CMs and
wanna weigh in?
DCMs there, so they.
I was just, it might be immaterial at this point. I was going to suggest that since these, we know that some changes have been made due to the transfer from a PDF document to a Word document, and that some of the context might be missing and just a quick read, it might be worth it for us to review it and bring it back to you next time
A
on
good
these
idea.
changes. And you could approve the red line changes now, and then we could review the entire document to see what's consistent and what isn't and bring it back to you.
Okay. All right, so do you want to modify your, did you make a,
No, I didn't.
No, I think I
No.
asked before a motion
Yeah.
was made. right?
okay, so the motion then we'll entertain
Well,
is that we
Do we even
approve
need
the
a motion
red
for the
line.
red lines? Just have them bring it back entirely again?
Unless you need it in place to expend some ARPA
Yeah,
funds.
That's a question.
I'm happy to make the motion
It's up to you.
for the red lines, because it might be time.
Do we need it for the audit?
We do not. They accepted it. They accepted the draft of the red line because the red line is what matters to them, and we said that we were bringing it to you for approval.
so we can bring it back.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll just bring back the whole thing, redlined and the, okay. And is that true? Now we go on to the grant policy.
Yep, thank you.
Oh, guys, they're coming in person. Okay, so let's keep working.
Here.
Okay, so the next,
So you don't have to handwrite
Changes.
finance director every time there's a grant request. Yeah.
is the grants management policy.
Was this also a PDF?
They're all PDFs.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you find some
More black?
No,
funny things? No,
this one's a little bit shorter.
I think I found on 5, the F in finance should be capitalized.
Good catch.
That's my contribution for tonight. And these basically are just correcting the titles that we give people in city government to do this, correct?
That's because
correct.
she's taken over.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have not previously had a finance director, so with the creation of that role and Martha stepping into it, we are undoing some of those policies.
Okay.
I would suggest you sprinkle a few commas in there for clarity. That sounds like a new, commas for clarity.
There are fewer commas in
Bumper
today's
sticker.
typographical rules than in prior
Because it's like,
days.
let's eat comma grandma. It's really important to put the comma there,
It's not in this policy. We will review it and bring back to you. How about
Okay.
that?
Oh, this
the
one as
commas?
well?
This one's good.
This one is
Oh, I thought you
good.
guys were saying you wanted us to wordsmith it.
No,
no.
Well, no,
we
they-
just need
I
a
mean-
capital F.
Yeah.
Need a capital F and
I do see a need for a couple of commas, but it's okay, unless you
Things
want.
have changed, Tim, since
Huh?
when we were in
You
college.
can't take two phrases and join them together without a comma. It can be confusing. I mean, I'm not one for overusing commas because then it's just waste and it's inefficient and it doesn't
yeah,
and it's
all that
meaningless.
ink, yeah.
But like I said, some commas are really important.
Well, you certainly have identified one with eating grandma, but this doesn't.
I didn't see that line in this.
Yeah, I didn't see that line in this document. So let's have a motion to approve the grants management policy as amended and presented,
So moved.
with the exception of the capital F.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, Tom?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow. And so the pension people aren't here. Oh, yes, they are.
Dan is
Excuse
here.
me. There's Daniel. All right. So let's go back to item 12, the asset update. And if you'd like to sit, you can sit or you can stand.
What do you prefer?
It's whatever you want. We can hear you both places.
It's gonna take about an hour and a half, so I'm gonna lie down if it's gonna take.
So will we. We'll join you. Bring the pillows.
You all have a copy of the,
We have the partnership review, yeah.
yes, that's it, that's the one, perfect.
Yes.
Do you have a bright green light there in the middle of your mic?
There you go.
There we go. I'm live.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's great to meet all of you. As a brief introduction, my name is Daniel Capel. I'm filling in for Pat Blizzard, who is also a representative of SEI. So thank you for having me here, and look forward to presenting last year's results. So flipping over to the executive summary, which is on page 4, and before I dive into the results and the economic point of view from this year, I'll add a little historical context to the year that we had in markets last year. So if you take the 60/40 portfolio, which is a standard portfolio for investors, kind of your baseline portfolio, last year was the second worst year in the past century, and there was only one worse year on record, and that was in 1931. So it was considerably bad on both the fixed income side of things and the equity side of things. So the standard balance portfolio, that's not what the,
Hold on for just 1 second.
Yes,
Ken,
sorry.
What do you want?
Did we want to present the pages he's going to be talking about?
Like put them up on the screen? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? Martha, you're on, right?
Sorry to hear that.
no problem. You're cutting into bad news, so it's always good to. Yeah, no problem.
I have one. Hey, Jessica, can you make me a presenter so I can do that?
Yes, sure. Just going too fast, we're ahead of ourselves here.
I know. What are we gonna do with all this extra time?
Oh. Did that work?
Yes, it did. I'm trying to go where I need to be.
Today's the 17th, yeah. Thank you. So 8 o'clock, God, we're gonna be here.
Okay, let me see here.
Time management.
And I'm on slide 4, or page 4.
I'm not getting any younger, though. I had a lot more energy before.
Perfect. All set?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So returning back to how historically bad things were last year in the markets, and again, so the only time that we saw the results like this dating back to 1931 was the only worst year. So it was extremely difficult, and that was for both stocks and for fixed income. So for equities and fixed income, it was challenging, and I'll get I'll dive a bit further into just why that happened as well as we move forward. So with that historical context, I'll first touch on our economic point of view of where we see things going this year, and then I'll dive into the portfolio perspectives, speaking directly to the pension plans portfolio, and then I'll go on to speak to just some economic background and capital markets background as well. Feel free to interrupt me and jump in at any point with any questions that you have along the way. So from an economic point of view, in the new year, we expect many of the same headwinds that we saw throughout 2022. Inflation has been stubborn. We have central banks set on bringing these inflation rates down. And as a result, we see tightening monetary policy. There's ongoing political tensions in the globe, namely the ongoing war in the Ukraine with Russia's invasion. And there's constant fears of recession throughout the globe, particularly in Europe, in light of what has gone on there. There was recessionary concerns there, and domestically in the United States, looking at the second half of the year, there's some recession concerns there. It really is a story of the Fed and interest rates, and we expect the Fed to continue raising interest rates into 2023 with a terminal rate of around 5.1% is where things are expected to go. The real question is whether this is going to be enough to bring down inflation on the one end, and then on the other side of things, is the Fed going to pump the brakes too hard in the economy, and are we going to see a recession? So there's this narrow path to what is referred to as, and often seen headlines as a soft landing, which is what is trying to be achieved here to bring down inflation on one hand without going into recession on the other. As a result, on the equity side of things, we saw valuations come in. As we've seen, a number of the large cap stocks, the technology names, a lot of their valuations have come down, and they were quite inflated through the COVID period. So a lot of what we've seen is the prices of a lot of these equities come down in light of the higher cost of capital. And also, as well, starting to spill in is fears over a slowing economy as well. Speaking directly to the portfolio and the performance for the 2022 calendar year, in the fourth quarter, we saw a positive return, which was great. After the first 3 quarters of the year, it was quite difficult, and the portfolio returned just over 7%, and that brought the calendar year 2022 return to negative 11.65%. For some context to the overall portfolio returns, the S&P 500 was down just over 19%. And the U.S. aggregate bond index was down around 13%. So the overall pension portfolio did fare better than both of those major broad indices. Speaking specifically to the equity markets, as we mentioned, it was a very choppy year in 2022. We did see a bounce off the lows in Q4, which was positive, and there is a value bias within the portfolio. Think of companies with strong operating cash flows, price to earning multiples, price to sale multiples. Those did considerably better than they had historically, and SEI has those as one of their focuses in their portfolio, so that was beneficial to the plan. Taking a look at the fixed income markets, again, we saw a modest rebound as bond yields moved lower, and I'll touch a bit further on this on the next page. But we did see one of the most challenging years for bond investors on record last year. It was really just the speed of change as we saw interest rates come up and yields come up across the curve at all maturities. And when yields come up, that means the price of fixed income assets is going down, and that's what we saw last year. Is when inflationary concerns come into play and the Fed is raising rates, that will lift bond yields across the board. Overall, the portfolio is well diversified from both a geographical standpoint, from an asset class standpoint with equities, fixed income, real estate. There's exposure to small cap equities, there's exposure to large cap equities, and then in fixed income, there's high yield debt, there's emerging markets debt, and there is also core U.S. fixed income among them. So it is a very broadly diversified portfolio, which is designed to perform well in the long term and help the plan achieve its goal. And just one action, and this is SEI being a manager of managers. In October of 2022, SEI replaced Xena Investment Management and Jupiter Asset Management and replaced Alliance Bernstein in the World Equity X US Fund, and this was to add a concentrated value approach. So these changes are happening seamlessly and are happening in all of SEI's funds as we see fit to either react to changing manager expectations or changing market expectations as well. So we are constantly monitoring not only the total portfolio, but the managers underlying the funds that the plan is invested in.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
So those investment managers, they must charge you a fee, right?
Yes.
I mean, you have an expense ratio for being in those funds.
Yes.
Did that expense ratio improve by going to the 2 new managers, or is it about the same? Or
I don't have that information offhand. I do know that that when we do we use our collective assets when we are going out to these managers, and that's one of the benefits of this model is we use our scale and we're using our negotiating power of the $120 billion of assets in just our OCIO program alone, and then we also have other investment programs. So we do have competitive fees, and we are able to use our bargaining power based on the assets we have. I doubt there would be a substantial change as there's not a significant difference in the type of managers that are coming in and being in the same asset class. You would not see a drastic difference in the change of fees. All right. Moving on to page 5, and I mentioned that there has been a substantial change in bond yields, and that has been a result of rates coming up, and as well that means that the price has come down on fixed income. The one thing that means going forward is that as assets are reinvested or as new contributions come into the fund, they're being invested at much higher yields than they have been historically. And that's very important for achieving long-term goals. It's been extremely challenging over the past decade. We've seen historically low rates, and you have that risk management piece of your portfolio not generating yield. So it's great to see, although it's painful to get there, that you are being compensated for holding fixed income if you look, for example, the core fixed income fund at the beginning of 2022 was yielding just over 1.5%, and that has increased to over 4% as of the beginning of this year. There's also compensation for taking on credit risk as well. High yield has almost doubled, and it really does present opportunities for skilled managers to be able to go and get paid and for taking on that risk. And they always say risk is the price of admission when you are investing, and it allows you to find opportunities to be compensated for taking risk and also being compensated appropriately with those yields that are out there. So as you can see across the board, these are much higher yields, which we don't expect yields to be going back to where they were really throughout the past decade. And of course, the pandemic, it was on the short end, the Fed took the rates down to zero in response to the pandemic, which makes it challenging for fixed income investors when you're not getting paid on your fixed income.
So is our portfolio is 60/40? No.
No, I was the 64. No, the portfolio is
How much do we have in bonds?
the in bonds. That is on. If you look on,
I was just curious.
yeah, that is on page. And if you go to the portfolio review tab, you can see all the allocations of each fund. So you can see the total fixed income is 30%,
Okay.
and that's the actual allocation.
And do you see that core income percentage hitting 5 this year?
It's completely possible. Again, if we have a terminal rate of the Fed going up to 5%, again, mind you, we do have an inverted yield curve, so you're seeing that would be right now. If you look at the 10-year, that's still, but as of today, it was around 3.55. It really depends where managers. So I'd say core fixed income, it could get up there, certainly. It is trending in that direction. And again, if you look at some of the shorter end, the limited duration with credit exposure as well, you are going to have yields. And keep in mind that the core fixed income fund does have some credit exposure in there as well, which is why it's higher than the limited duration, which is just government and investment grade exposure. Any other questions on the bond yields here on page 5 before I move along? Great. So I'll just do a brief market and economic review, and that is on page 7. So as I mentioned, with the challenges of last year, if you look at the light blue line, the 1-year performance, there is only one line pointing to the right, and that is commodities. There was only one positive major asset class throughout the year last year, speaking to the challenges that investors face across the board. If we look at the darker, the black lines, that is representative of the fourth quarter. So we did see some positive results as inflation has been cooling down a bit, and investors are looking for something to be positive about. And we definitely have seen that continue into the beginning of this year. Another big thing that's going on right now is the strength of the U.S. dollar has backed off a bit, which has been positive for international markets. And there is the reopening of China, and them reverse the government there has reversed course on their COVID policy and has essentially opened up the economy, which could spark economic activity as the world's second largest economy. So it's definitely the fears of inflation are still lingering, but really the question is of whether a recession is going to happen. If it does happen, when is it going to happen, and how deep would the recession be? But I would say overall, it would be difficult to have a year in the fixed income markets as difficult as we had last year, but there are still a number of headwinds in the equity space that we're seeing. Just quickly on the slide 8, speaking to U.S. equities. As I mentioned, we've seen a reversal in the trend where growth stocks were outperforming value stocks. And if you look on the bottom left-hand side of this chart on page 8, you can see that value was a significant outperformer of growth on a year-to-date basis, which really it could be changing tides similar to fixed income, where a number of the unprofitable growth companies or companies with expected earnings much later in the future, they're coming back down to earth, and we are seeing value, which is companies that have earnings now with cost of capital and bond yields where we are, you're being rewarded for having earnings now as opposed to in the future. So we do think that it could be a meaningful change in what we see going forward from that standpoint. Looking over on slide 9 within the international equity markets, without the US dollar, the negative impact of that, we did see that things actually weren't particularly bad on a relative basis to the US in emerging markets. If you think of the major emerging market economies, they're very resource oriented, and that was beneficial. And we also saw in Europe, they did not suffer as much from the expectations that there was going to be an imminent recession from the ongoing war in Russia, and in Ukraine with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and we really think that there still is some recession risk there, and they have been given the good grace of not having overly cold weather. That was another big concern, was heating their homes, and that they've avoided that as well thus far. Looking at slide 10 on the fixed income review, just wanted to bring your attention as I was speaking about the yields. On the bottom left-hand side, you can just see the magnitude of the shift in yields. If you look at the line at the bottom, that's where yields were as of 12/31/2021. And you can see that shift up where on the short end, which is on the left-hand side, you can see rates were at 0. And you can see the incremental increases in the federal funds rate all the way just north of 4% there on the left-hand side. And across the board, as you can see, across all maturities, there was a massive shift up in the yield curve, which resulted in the price decline across the fixed income securities. One thing to point out is, as you can see peaking up on the left-hand side, is that on the short end, looking at the shorter dated maturities, they are higher in yield than the longer dated, and an often indicator of a recession is an inverted yield curve. Economists like to look to the 10s and 2s, and as we can see here, that the 10s and 2s are inverted, and that is typically indicative at a recession some point in the future. So something to keep an eye on as we see.
Sorry, I don't understand. Where are the 10s and the 2s? I guess they don't really
Yeah, so if you look at the light blue line there, that's the yield. Oh, I'm on slide 10.
Yeah, okay.
So if you look at the light blue line, you can see that it is higher where the 2-year is. The maturities are along the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So you can see that the yield on the 2-year is higher, and then if you go over to the 10, it's lower. So it's inverted by about 50 basis points right now, or half a percentage point. So it's the 10s are the 10s and 2s as they call it that's inverted currently, and that is depicted by the lighter blue line being higher than the darker lines further along the maturities.
Okay.
And then just on the right-hand side as well, you can see the option-adjusted spreads, and really that is the premium built in over treasuries, and those have been increasing as well, which is, again, you're being compensated for taking on risk, and there is higher yields across the board. I'm just going to touch briefly on a couple of economic themes that we're seeing, and then that will be all for me. So I'll flip over to slide 11. One of the difficult challenges of the current economic environment is that there aren't enough workers anywhere. You constantly see it leaving leaving lunch day. You see help wanted. You see help wanted signs everywhere. It's very difficult trying to find employment in these times, particularly in the service industry. We really do see it, and if you look at the darker blue line that is above all the others, that is domestically in the U.S., and you can see that it is an extremely tight labor market, and those are the job vacancies. So after COVID, you can see it was just a straight line shot upwards, and it's kind of slowed down a bit, but it's pretty stubbornly sitting at a very high ratio. And the U.S. by far has the tightest labor market relative to other developed economies. The issue with that is, looking on to slide 12, is when there are job vacancies and people are trying to find workers, in order to get them, you need to pay them more, and that is how you acquire the workers. And if you look at, again, the dark blue line, and this is, all major economies are trending upwards, but particularly in the U.S., you can see that taking a 4-quarter moving average, and that is just to smooth out the results through time, you can see that compensation has gone up substantially. And that is considered a form of sticky inflation. It's much easier to set a price at a gas pump, take it down the next day. Much harder to say you're getting paid $25 an hour and then go to the person the next day and say, I changed my mind, I want to pay you $20 an hour. It's not the same adjustment that you can make. So wages are very sticky from an inflation standpoint as well. And we are seeing some of those components that are starting to trend upwards and could prove difficult for the Fed. Moving on to slide 13, and this is the question of when will the Fed pivot, and that really is, and the bond market is pricing that the Fed is going to be done and actually reverse course at some time in the middle of this year, whether that's because a recession is being predicted in the second half of this year, or simply that inflation will be in a spot where the Fed has some leeway in what they're able to do. But typically, what you would see is that the Fed will only pivot when the economy lands in a divot, as indicated here. And typically, it's the Fed is not going to want to have inflation trending in the right direction only to have a resurgence again. They want to stamp it out. In the 70s, we saw instance of that where inflation was coming down, and then they reared its ugly head, as they say, and then would come to, it's really, so a recession would typically be why the Fed would change course in order to ease monetary conditions from where they are. And on slide 14, this is just to paint a picture of where we have been for the past decade from a monetary policy standpoint and where we are today. So if you look across the board in all of the major developed economies, central bank policy rates were near zero, near one, and that really started after the global financial crisis, and they stayed there, really, with the exception of Australia, kind of held on for longer but ended up joining its peers. So we've really had a decade of easy money, which has made it we've seen a lot of inflated valuations, again, in the non-profitable tech. We've seen investors not being compensated for being savers and holding fixed income investments. And this could be a change that, going forward, returning to a normal environment where rates are not having a lower bound of zero, which difficult to get there as companies are dealing with the higher cost of capital, and as bond yields go up and the prices come down. But we do think that that monetary policy has definitely shifted and likely to not return to where it was, as we saw over the past decade post-GFC, and then really again during COVID when rates were dropped to zero in almost all major global economies to support the economic environment during those difficult times. That is, I kind of covered on the economic outlook, so I won't dive into this slide as well. I kind of touched off, but here's a summary of all the major points I've discussed. Any final questions for me before I can do, I'll do a quick portfolio performance review and this is it for the economic portion, though.
Just a couple comments, right? So at the meeting today, we discussed that probably October meeting of the Pension Advisory Committee, we would talk about looking at the expected rate of return and a change in that, and maybe Eric will talk about that when he gives his presentation. There also, Martha researched that the $8.168 million loan that was taken out in 2010, right, will be paid out and finished in April of 2031, just so you know.
31?
2031. Right, and the current annual loan payment is about $661,000 right now on that. So, and remember, we refinanced it while Tom Hubbard was still here.
That's right.
Right, and in fact, and the interest rate went way down, and I think we paused the payment because we were able to during the budget problem during COVID. So anyway, those are just some points to remember. And I just wanted to point out on page 11 with the not enough workers, and Aaron, we talked about this at the meeting today, was where do the workers go, right? And from what I've read, there's a lot of factors at play. One is that, pre-pandemic, the unemployment rate was pretty low to begin with. Then the pandemic hit, and you had a lot of people that are on the verge of retiring, and they said, forget it, I'm just going to retire. They left the workforce. Then you had 1 million people plus die, of which probably more than half of those were employed at one point, right? So you had over 500,000 people just die and they're gone from the workforce. That's awful. Then on top of that, there is this problem with opioid addiction and fentanyl overdoses, and that's taking out another swath of 100,000 young people a year that would be in the workforce or should have been in the workforce at some point, right? And then I think on top of that, you have a lot of discomfort in the housing market, right, which is making it harder for people to find good housing or affordable housing. And so then I think that probably that affects their employability, or because they can't find a place to live, so they find it hard to find a place to be able to work at. So there are all of these stresses in our population, and that's borne out in this graph by the number of openings per person right now. And then the thing I worry about is that I don't mean to go on, is the effect of the pandemic on young people today, especially in the educational system as they move through. And there's probably a proportion of them that they're going to be finding it difficult to enter the workforce like their predecessors would have, just from whatever stresses they experienced, during their educational years, where they lost 2 years essentially, right? And so I worry about that. So I think that this problem is going to be with us for quite a while, and we need to. I don't know what we need to do to try and boost people into the workforce, but I think there's a lot of retirees out there that need to come back to work. If you're thinking about retiring, don't retire. Well, that includes me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Take that back.
Tim, I would just throw in childcare as well as
absolutely.
another
Right.
factor that keeps half the workforce, or not half, but a lot of people at home.
Right, and that's on our radar.
Yeah.
Right.
Along with housing and stuff.
Right.
So that's just another piece.
That's a great point, Tim, as well. And as the unemployment is one of the key things that the Federal Reserve is looking at when they set their monetary policy. With their targeting an unemployment rate, they want the unemployment rate to go up to bring down inflation. And when you see job vacancies that high, it's difficult to see that number coming down when everyone needs workers right now. So it presents an interesting conundrum for central bankers. And this problem is, as you can see, it's magnified in the U.S., but it is really a global issue. As you can see, all developing economies are dealing with similar stressors.
If we had a decent immigration policy, this problem might not be as severe.
I would agree with you.
It might not be as severe in the future if we could get some people in Washington, D.C. to put their heads together and come up with some good ideas. Canada has a decent immigration policy, but they don't have a southern border. So.
And they aren't yes, they are on the graph, aren't they? Yeah. Well, thanks for that happy note. Yeah, that's a good way to round it up.
You're welcome.
So, before I depart, I will just, I'll just take you quickly to the overall portfolio performance, and that is on page 21. And as I showed, sorry, that is on page 20. I apologize. So as I mentioned, for the 1 year period, it was negative 11.65%, relative to the index at negative 12.68%. And that's on a gross fee basis. On a net fee basis, the portfolio is still ahead of the benchmark. I think it's important, though, and it's extremely difficult when you're going through these years, especially one that is generationally bad. if you look out over the longer term and you look at since the inception of investing with SEI, that number is still closer to 7%, which is nearly at what the expected return or the intended return for the portfolios is 7.25%. So even factoring in a huge down year, over the longer term, it's still in a good spot. And with yields being higher, that is promising. If they are to stay higher moving forward, that gives you that fixed income piece of the portfolio. So again, while it has been extremely challenging for institutional investors, for individual investors, it didn't matter who you were. It was tough to avoid these types of numbers, but it's important to, again, be in well diversified portfolios from a global standpoint, from an asset class standpoint, and try to focus on the longer term as best you can, even though it's difficult at times like this. And that is everything from my
What do you
end.
think will turn us around?
Pardon me?
What do you think will turn us around?
Well, I think there's a lot to digest right now. If you look at what happened, if you saw that interest rate increase, it's normally a tightening cycle is 25 basis points is a standard rate hike in normal times, and the Fed was issuing 75 basis point rate hikes. So it's just the magnitude was so fast, and it really was. Because inflation went from being transitory to not being so transitory, there was almost a panic to saying we need to tighten things up before you end up in a spiral with inflation. So I think the turnaround comes from the market accepting that there is going to be a higher cost of capital moving forward, which we're not going to have that lower bound of zero, and really just digesting and processing this new environment that we are in, where rates could potentially be higher for longer. And I think on the equity side, again, the Fed is trying to engineer a recession or a slowdown. That's how you bring inflation down. And once investors are comfortable that a slowdown is coming and the brakes haven't been pumped too hard, I think that's when you could potentially see things turning around. But there's a lot of negative headwinds facing the market. So it's, I think, as difficult of an answer as it is, time certainly is one of those things. And we got so used to, if we look at what happened with COVID, is markets went off a cliff in March of 2020, and then central banks stepped in right away, and equities recovered very quickly. Typically, those types of things take time to evolve and sort themselves out, and to find a fair value for where the market should be. So I think it should expect to be longer, and it could be a year, 2 years for things to really get back on a regular footing. That doesn't mean that what happened last year is going to happen again, but I think expectations should be tempered based on the changes that have happened.
Would you ever shift the investment proportions or percentages?
Certainly, that's a great question, and the way that this fund is constructed is within each asset class, and this is revisited on an annual basis. We do look at the asset allocation, and we do an advice study with our in-house actuary. And one of the things you don't want to is being overly tactical often can be detrimental. The one thing that does happen is underneath in the active components, all of the managers that are hired within our funds, they are constantly adjusting based on their expectations of the market. And we're able to, our portfolio managers at SEI will also make adjustments based on their expectations. For example, leaning into value based on the market environment, which has been favorable so far. So at the overall asset mix, I don't think there is any need to make changes. Again, it's a well-diversified global portfolio. Of course, along the way, make changes, but nothing drastic. And I believe the last asset allocation review took place in August of last year. So I'd expect, particularly in light of the changing fixed income environment, it would likely be prudent to do another one in August of this year and revisit changes then.
I have a question in terms of the different management firms with whom you work.
Yes.
and you probably don't know how to answer or don't have the answer, but I'm just curious, from kind of things I've read, it seems as if there's an incredible amount of PPP money that was given out and not used. And to my mind, it ought to be given back. I mean, if you don't need it, if you needed it, you would have spent it. So how do they factor in how much a particular corporation may have piled away in their bank accounts of all this free money to dig them out of a hole that they apparently didn't need because they didn't spend it? And there it is, and they don't want to invest because the rates are so high, yet they have all this money that was essentially zero that they're sitting on. I mean, how do we as a country, I guess, come to grips with that? Or do we just sort of forget that and it's like, oh, we won't talk about that money. We'll just complain about rates going up and we can't afford to invest.
I wish I had an answer for you on that one in regards to the PPP loans and investing. I mean, that's often been, you know, it's not with just the PPP loans. There's often been, particularly recently, the lack of investment in capital expenditure, particularly domestically, which has been a challenge. But I think as we are seeing things change, and really you think about it, a lot of the investment has been in technology and real estate over the past decade, and it looks like there is going to be a CapEx boom in investing in America as well. If you look at what's going on, and Tim and I discussed this earlier today with the CHIPS bill and the foundries going up. There's a huge one going up in Ohio and Arizona. So there really is going to be this need to invest in capital expenditures and tangible assets. So whether it's the investment managers deploying it or whomever it is deploying it, I can't speak to that, but I do think that we will see a CapEx boom, and I know that the federal government has also allocated a large sum of assets to infrastructure and other projects like that, which starting to see it get off the ground, and I do think that that will come to the forefront as really needing to invest in tangible assets overall. To individual managers, on page 24, there is a list of all the managers that are in the investment program. I'm not sure, I've heard rumblings of what you're referring to. I think it was more so in PPP loans not being used in the proper manner or used for certain expenses. I can't remember the specific names offhand. I can't speak to our individual managers, but I'm sure that is something that would be looked at from a governance perspective or would be addressed as our manager research was speaking to them. I've seen the list of the number of questions and the amount of information that is collected, even for managers that aren't hired, and it's quite extensive. So,
thank you.
One bright spot in all of this is the chaos in the energy markets, right, has really tried to freeze Russia out of the natural gas supply, and Germany has completed, they're down to 0% Russian gas imports, right, which is really great. And I think other countries are on track for that as well. So there's a couple things going on. China is starting to unfreeze in terms of consumer demand because they're reducing their COVID lockdown. So that means more production. So their GDP was only 3% last year, so that should pick up this year because they won't have the lockdowns they had before. Unfortunately, they're having a huge surge in COVID infections and COVID deaths, right? So they're going to go through what we went through 2 years ago, probably. But then at the same time, the raw material prices to make batteries is dropping quickly, and the price of solar panels is also dropping quickly. And there's a huge push to get into renewables as faster than we ever had because of everything that's going on in Ukraine. So this is from a climate perspective, even though there's been a conversion to coal in Germany and other parts of Europe, right? Unfortunately, but they need power, right? And they've lost a lot of it. So the nice thing is that there's this big push to get into renewables even more. So more solar, more wind, and then all the technologies that go with it, right? And then the building of a couple battery plants in the U.S. and the building of some more chip plants in the U.S., right? So I mean, this is all, I think, goodness long-term, but it's not gonna make a difference right away. But the fact that solar panel prices are going down is really good, because we just need to grow that enormously.
And Germany is a great example of where when humans are faced with the problem and it's right in front of them, they're able to adapt right away, as opposed to it's difficult to think of something that could be here a decade from now, 15 years from now. And as you mentioned, Tim, the pivot in being able to get completely off of Russian gas in a matter of 4 months is pretty incredible, when the coffers were almost empty at the beginning of the conflict. So.
Good thing they have some coal deposits, because they just opened a new coal pit. But anyway. All right, well, any more questions? Tom, do you have any questions? You're usually,
No questions tonight. Thank you, though.
okay. Okay, well, that's it for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you
Okay.
very much for having me, and
Be a happy new year.
yes, you
Well,
as well.
thank you.
And hopefully there are better results. It would be very difficult to be as
bad as it was
bad
this
as
year.
last
That's-
year, but
That is-
never say never in these
That
things.
is very comforting.
It would be, yes, exactly. When you're comparing yourself, as I said earlier today, to an era of the Great Depression, it's usually means things can only go up from there. So
Except if 1931 was the worst, wasn't the crash in 1928?
that was the sell-off in both bonds and equities that year. It was, yeah, I think you're thinking of is it Black Monday? Is that I think that was in 1929, I believe. It was 1931 was the calendar year where both equities and bonds sold off the most.
Okay. So it was a series of bad years. Let's
Yeah,
hope we're-
this was still not remotely close to as bad as that was, but it still it took second place. I believe that was still a large number to take first. It would have had to been a significant number of percentage points higher, but nonetheless, just to add some historical context. Normally, equities go down, fixed income provides a buffer either way, but they decided to go hand in hand down based on the economic environment we're in.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to meet all of you.
Yeah, let's hope we don't have another year like this.
Yes, Ted. Imagine he's having some frustrating days too.
Yeah, sad stories.
Hi.
Hello, welcome.
One second.
So you're going to tell us about our pension valuation. Yay.
Yeah, so I'm Eric Shate from Newport Group, and I'm going to talk about the liability side of the pension plan. We'll go through some different funding methods, the liability, the contribution, and just look at your funding status compared to other cities. Just 1 minute. Okay. We'll start off on page 4. I'm just going to briefly, I'll try not to bore everyone or get too in depth, but I'm going to start off briefly with the funding methods, and that's how we allocate liability over time to participants in the plan. So we're going to look at 2 liability measures, what's called unit credit, which we'll also call present value of accrued benefit, and then the other one's entry age normal. So when we're talking about the liability, the unit credit is, let's say on 7/1/2022, for participants in the plan, that's what they had earned on that date. If they were to stop working, if the plan stopped existing, that would be the liability on that date with nothing further in the future. But then entry age normal takes into account that they will work into the future, they'll earn more compensation. And so that we know that they're going to be earning compensation into the future, so we're going to spread it out over time and incorporate that now. And just to look at that graphically, if we go to slide 6, just two different ways of getting to the same point. The top line is the entry age normal liability. The bottom is the unit credit. The unit credit will shoot up towards the end, and because we want to keep your contribution even over time, we will do all the funding method on the entry age normal, which has a higher liability now, but grows slower over time. And it's also the method that you have to use for GASB purposes. Next slide, slide 7. I've been talking about liability. Liability is there's participants in the plan earning a benefit. It's the present value of their benefits earned in the past when we talk about liability. And then when we talk about normal cost, we're talking about the present value of what we expect to be earned in the next year. So a 1-year period of putting money in to put in benefits earned, and then you have the liability for what was in the past. And so then we go through to the next slide on page 8. What we do is we take the entry age funding, the entry age normal method for liabilities are used to calculate your contribution to the plan, and it helps to smooth out volatility. And there's also the GASB method. If we go to slide 11. So each year we calculate a contribution for the plan, and what we do is we take the liability and we compare it to your assets in the plan. And if there's any unfunded liability, the first part of the contribution to the plan is going to be an amortization payment to pay down that unfunded. And then the second part of the contribution is going to be a payment for the normal cost or additional benefits that are being earned in the current year. There's a small portion of interest added. But when we make the amortization payment, it was a 20-year amortization payment. You'll see in a little bit that it's come down. We've been shortening the period to amortize the unfunded faster over time. But it originally was 20 years. And then on the side, employees are also putting money into the plan. So then on the next slide, slide 12, what happened in 2019, the plan was frozen to new entrants, so no new employees will enter the plan. And at that time, because the 20-year amortization period, it's a long period, it's 20 years, and it was resetting every year, so it never actually ended. It kept being 20 every year. So in 2019, the city started making contributions on a slowly quickening schedule. So it was in 2019 it was 20 years, in 2020 it was 19 years, 18 years for the amortization schedule, because that aligned with when most employees from the plan will be retired. So the goal is that as no new employees come in, the population will mature, and you'll fund the plan up in a quicker rate as they get towards retirement, so that you have 100% funding when there's no employees earning benefits, and then you're just making monthly payments out of the plan and not funding the plan as much in the future. So that started in 2019. On the next slide, it's just a comparison of what the contribution was. The top line is the contribution this year with the 20-year amortization versus the 17, which is what we're at right now. So the contribution for the city to make to the plan is 1.175 million compared to what it would have been of 1.129 million. So it's not a lot more, but it's more, and each year, that adds up over time as we get further in the future.
And it'll get bigger each year until you're till we are fully funded?
So the contribution for the quicker method relative to the old method will be bigger. The actual contribution could theoretically get smaller depending on asset returns and stuff like that from year to year.
We can't have too many years like this.
Right.
Last one.
So we'll get into it in a little bit, but these contributions are based on a smooth value of assets. So if you're looking at this year compared to last year's contribution was $1,050,000. This year it's $1,175,000. It's an increase. It's not a large increase. And that's because the assets are smoothed out. If they weren't smoothed out, you would have had several hundred thousand increase from year over year in your contribution, and then maybe in the next year after that drop way down. So just to smooth out the volatility, we use the smooth value of assets. So in the next slide, this is just graphically, the big box is the city's total portion. It's split up between current benefits being earned of the normal cost and the amortization payment. As you can see, it's almost 50-50, whereas, you know, eventually that amortization payment will go away as you get close to 100% funded, and then it will move down to just the normal cost. And then you have the employee contributions of about 300,000 in addition. If we go to slide 16. So we talked briefly about the two liabilities, the unit credit and the entry age normal earlier. This is the funded status of the plan based on the top section is the present value of accrued benefit, the bottom is the entry age normal. And this is using the smooth asset value. But on the present value of accrued benefits, the plan was about 99% funded on 7/1/2022. So that's using, you know, benefits earned through that date. If you walked away at that point in time, you would have been 99% funded of benefits earned in the plan. Then if you go to the entry age normal, it's lower at 88%, and that's because it's a little more forward looking, knowing that, you know, you're not walking away from the plan now. People will earn compensation in the future, and their last several years have a large impact on their benefit, and that's incorporating that in there. But so you're 88% funded on the smooth entry age normal basis. We'll see a graph.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, forgive me that I was not at PAC to ask this question. When you're doing the entry age normal calculations, are you looking at this at each specific employee and how, like, if they're in those last 3 years and shortening that value, or are you using some kind of average employee model?
Each employee will, like, if someone's 10 years from retirement, expected retirement, they'll have 10 years of compensation increases applied, and then their benefits kind of split, so you get that straight line over time from now to then. So it's on an individual basis.
It's on an individual basis. Thank you.
On the next slide, this is the same two methods, funded status, but based on the market value. So for this one, the present value of accrued benefits is 95%, and the entry age normal liability is about 83%. And so if you're looking at your actual financials, that 83%, 82.73 is what will go on financial statements for the year, or your auditor's report. We'll see shortly how these have moved over time and how it compares to other cities in the state. And everyone had movements down in the market value compared to the prior year. If we just go to slide 19, this is that chart. Kind of looking back at history, you could see where the bond was taken out and a large payment was put in at around 2011 into the plan. The top line is the unit credit funding method, and the bottom is the entry age normal. So the unit credit went from 113% to 95%, whereas the entry age normal went from 99 to 83%. And it's a large drop year over year, which everyone has had, but you also had a large increase the prior year from asset returns that year. So you're almost basically back to where you were the year before that. So on the next slide, just to compare these numbers to other plans, you have points of reference. Your plan was 82.73% funded on the entry age normal basis. The average public plan was 74% funded.
Average for Vermont or for the country?
Average for the country. And that was down from 85% the year before. So roughly same drop year over year for your plan compared to the average plan. Beamer's is 73.6%. And then the teachers are 54.8%. on here. Burlington is 80% and St. Albans is 61%. But just to point out that these two numbers for those two cities, the most current numbers I could get was from the year before. So that's not 6/30/2022, that's 6/30/21. So they don't have that current market deficit showing up in those ratios for them there.
Oh, so they'd be even lower.
They'll be lower, yeah.
Good news for us.
Yes, you were
Well,
very.
yeah, we're still ahead of the pack.
Oh
right?
yes, yeah, you're very well funded, and hopefully the assets bounce back and we recover some of that. But you're by no means in a bad spot right now.
Well, the teachers don't look too good. Yeah, but for our purview.
Slide 20, we'll go 23. I'm going to briefly go through the assumptions in the plan. I don't want to bore you to death and go into it too much. The quick version is that we use assumptions for things like when people are expected to retire, what the discount rate is, or what future compensation increases are expected to be. And we do review the experience in the plan every year, compare it to what the assumptions are. And so for this year, there were no changes from the prior year, but I'm just going to go through them all real quick, just because they're major assumptions in the plan. So on slide 24, briefly talking about mortality, we use what's the most up-to-date mortality table and mortality projection that was available. It had been updated every year, so every year the Society of Actuaries would come along and take new data from Social Security and put it into the mortality table and just update it for experience. And we would adopt those changes every year and make very small changes year over year. For 2022, they did not publish those tables because it was the first year that COVID data was going to show up in everything. And there was no consensus on how to treat that and how to project it out into future mortality and how that's going to affect everything. So as of right now, we're using what's the 2021 table. It's still the most current table, but in the next coming years, we may have more updated tables, but that's just the reason why it didn't update this year. We use a standard, it's called scale T3 turnover table, and there's a low likelihood of somebody leaving just because they quit, go to another job, and it's graded based on age. So the older they are, the less likely they are. T3 is a very low probability scale of turnover, and there's not much turnover in the plan in general. The long-term rate of return is 7.25%, and this kind of gets used interchangeably with discount rate, but it's the long-term expected return on assets, and it's used to discount future liabilities to the present in the plan. But it's currently 7.25%. I believe it was 7 years ago that it was lowered from 7.5 to 7.25. And as of right now, the median rate for public plans is 7%. So when you move down to 7.25, you were a little ahead of everyone else. But every year it's kind of been inching down what everyone's been doing. And long-term expectations have come down, whereas now you're a quarter of a point above the median, which isn't a big deal, but it's the reason why we will be looking at it again going into next year to see if it's something to get changed to go down to 7%.
Does that affect how you can sort of make it more consistent year to year?
Yeah, so if it's lower, it'll put a larger liability present and less in the future. And we'll see kind of, actually on the next slide,
Okay.
we can look at real quick. It's just what the impact of, this is a 1 percentage point change would do to the liability. So 1% up or down would add about $6 million to liability. but we would probably be looking at a quarter of a percentage point change, so 1.25 million, no, 2 million-ish in current liability. And just to go back to slide 24 real quick, some of the major assumptions is we assume public safety employees retire at age 53, which they can retire at 50, but historically they've stayed a little longer, and that's the experience of the plan, and non-public at age 65. There's expected future compensation increases of public safety at 5% and non-public at 4%. And historically, you know, from year to year, there may be a little bit above or below that, but it's the averages have come in pretty close to those two numbers. So slide 28 real quick. We were talking about the smooth assets versus the market value. The lighter blue line that starts underneath, jumps up, and then comes back down is the market value of assets. And the teal line is the smooth value. So you can just kind of see how over time, you know, the market will jump up above and below, but the smooth value keeps, you know, steadily going along. And what that does for you is say, last year, you made a contribution on a smooth value that was much below the market value. So it helped you fund for the future for years when there's a downturn in the market. And now this year you're making a lower contribution than you otherwise would have on the market value, but it's because you put in more last year to kind of smooth it out from year to year. I will go to slide 29. Real quick, the historical returns, 3 years, 6.25%, 5 years pretty similar, 10 years about 7.4%, and it's compared to the 7.25% assumption. And just to point out, when I was talking about the the long-term rate of return, looking at it, that really has nothing to do with this past year. It's a long-term expectation that's just, it's been trending down over time. Pre-COVID, pre-everything now, and it's not directly related to prior year returns. Slide 32. We have different groups of employees in the plan. You have the top group here, which is the light blue, which is the active employees. They're employed by the city, they're in this plan, and they're earning benefits. There are 68 of those as of 7/1/22, and that's down from 78 the year before. So some of those active employees either left employment or most of them retired. You have 52 employees who worked here, have a benefit, but they're not getting paid yet. Maybe they're just not old enough or they haven't taken their benefits yet, but they're not earning new benefits. It's just sitting there waiting for them to get paid. And then there's 93 that are actively getting paid monthly payments. And you can kind of see the trend over time here where the retirees at the bottom is growing as a portion of the population and the actives are shrinking. And you're going to keep seeing that over time because there's no new employees. Eventually everyone will be retired. A long time from now, but eventually. And then just quickly, participant random statistics on the participants. Not really random, but the average non-public safety employee has been employed for about 17 years, public safety 14, and then both have between 8 and 9 years of expected future service before they retire.
And this is South Burlington specific, or is this?
Right.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And so how does that, is that pretty similar to other communities?
I would say it's pretty similar. The way you can compare it is how mature you get over time, and by mature I mean like as there's no new employees entering the plan, so the average service of someone in this plan is going to slowly get more and more over time because nobody new is coming in. People are just in there. But for a similar plan, it's pretty similar to other plans. And that's all I have. If there's any questions.
Do we have any questions?
It's interesting because we have no new entries into our pension plan, and from as of 2019, right? Everybody's going into VEMRs, right? So I was just curious. I mean, can we quantify the difference in cost to the city of a unit of contribution to the VEMRs versus a unit of contribution to our pension system? I mean, are they about the same, or is VEMRs less expensive, normalized somehow? It also depends on what the payout's supposed to be, what the pension formula is also for each, retiree. But from a raw point of view right now, if you just like normalize it, the number of employees that are in each system, that we're paying for,
I don't know the specifics of VEMRs, but I do believe that overall the per participant cost on a percentage of pay is a little less, I believe.
With VEMRs?
Yeah, even you have to look at the different people in different groups.
Right.
But the biggest impact is that you don't have the risk or the liability of, say, investing the assets.
True.
Or like that amortization payment if.
Right. Yeah, no.
Those things can balloon, and then it's all.
But then we have to wait for the legislature to act if that funding liability gets too precarious, right?
And we know how well that they have responded to teachers.
Yes, they have in a down year.
Yeah, I mean, 54%.
I do think it's important to note that the VEMR's retirement system and the teacher's retirement system are significantly different. VEMR's being much healthier, primarily because VEMR's doesn't come with health insurance, so that's a benefit employees don't have through the VEMR system.
VESTERS includes the health insurance?
The teacher's pension includes the health insurance cost.
I didn't realize that was present in that. Okay.
Right, VEMR's does not. I think we could do that analysis. I don't think we've done that analysis, and I think it would include a lot of far out year modeling of what the VEMR's employees' experience would be for VEMR's decision making out into the future in a way that we have more control now in those out year decisions.
Do we normally give COLAs to our retirees within our city pension system?
There is a COLA in the public safety side of the plan.
The public safety side.
Yeah.
And is that a formula based on CPI or?
It is 3% per year, but it stops when they start taking Social Security.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yep. Okay. And okay. Yep. I forgot about that. Thank you.
What stops when they start taking Social Security?
The COLA.
COLA. Okay, so it's just a flat payment after Social Security?
Yeah, once they get, when they hit Social Security and they take it, there's an offset to their benefits. They actually have a reduced payment from this plan, but then it just stays the same going forward.
And we rely on the employee the retiree to tell us when they go on Social Security, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that a contractual thing, or is that just a pension policy that we have written and adopted?
The Social Security offset?
Yeah.
The offset itself is a part of the plan document.
The plan document.
And
okay.
I believe it was bargained when it was originally
it was,
set
okay.
up. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I think it actually may sit in both, which is part of an active discussion.
Okay. There are no questions. Tom, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, though.
All right. Well, early night for you. Yeah. Or earlier than we had anticipated. So. Okay. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
So we flip down to number 16 now. Consider prioritizing adopting a short-term rental ordinance and associated implementations.
It's
step.
9 o'clock. Does anybody need a break? I'm just asking
Oh,
if anybody does.
do you want a 5-minute break? South Burlington City Council meeting of Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. And we are on item 16. Consider prioritizing adopting a short-term rental ordinance and associated implementation steps with the conversation tonight as one to identify if the council as a majority would like to pursue this and to provide leadership or management with a direction or directions. So, do you want to?
I'll jump in here.
Certainly is an important initiative for Councilor Emery. She's done a lot of work on this. There was a lot to read, but it was good stuff. It was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I brought this to your attention last spring, and I think we had a discussion on June 1st of last year. And I continue to receive emails from residents, and I think sometimes it's sent to the entire council, talking about, houses that are being bought from people from out of state, and that will be turned into a short-term rental. And it is something that people see as an investment, and when we are dealing with our housing shortage and with the lack of workers, I think that that is something that should be foremost on our mind. How can we respond to that? We also have neighbors who are concerned about losing the character of their neighborhood. And we also have an hospitality industry who has to compete. And so I know that when the Economic Development Committee looked at this, that was foremost in their mind, the hospitality industry and how these homes aren't necessarily paying into our rooms and meals, exactly. So I know that staff is an issue for us here, and so I was looking at what happened in Denver, which is note 6 in my initial write-up from last March. The law in Denver requires registered hosts to sign an affidavit, and hundreds of property owners are reportedly shutting down short-term rentals to avoid legal implications. So it would perhaps just simply be self-enforced, right? All it takes is, one quick note to the planning and zoning office, this person isn't in compliance, and that signed affidavit, would be there to, I think, as a deterrent to anybody who would want to go around our regulations. And currently people are going around our regulations. Our current regulations, they define bed and breakfast as a detached single-family residence with 4 or fewer rooms for rent. They must be the primary residence of the owner or operator. And I believe that there was also, I have it on my computer, was it an acre minimum?
Yes.
Or, right? And I know that there are homes in my neighborhood where we're quarter acres that are Airbnbs, sold out long-term. And my neighborhood is an entry neighborhood in our very expensive city. Not that homes are cheap there for the necessarily everybody, but it's a real concern, I think, based on all of the things that I just raised about our economy, about our housing market, and about our neighborhoods. So what I did last year was I just simply came up with some language. This clearly isn't ordinance. It's just language that could be integrated into an ordinance. it's not finalized. I just put down, kind of things that I saw as industry standards that, might be open to different language. For instance, all pets are prohibited. That's an industry standard, but Vermont is very pet friendly. So in note 9, I wrote down what Helen had suggested regarding, the requirement that they be vaccinated and informed of the ticks, but also our city requirements for leashing and poop bags, keeping the neighborhoods clean. There's, just the concern that would, of course, require some staff oversight, right? So anyway, I just wanted to bring this forward because we are receiving a lot of communications about it. I know that the Affordable Housing Committee is eager to see something move forward. So I told them that I would bring this forward to you all again. And I would be in favor, and I hope you agree, that we have our staff take a look at this language and potentially draw up something that, with our current staffing, either something that would work, or to come back and say, with our current staffing, we can't possibly do this, but here's what we would need in order to move forward. I think, I certainly don't want to have, an uproar from people, but at the same time, I think that we are a regulating body, and when we have real impacts on our workforce, we have to take it seriously. And so I think that, I never like to rile up a controversy, but if it's something we have to discuss, we have to face that fact. So I certainly would be up to that challenge, because I think our workforce needs to have housing, and this is a high tourist area, so we're really having to compete and determining which, for instance, summer residences, obviously where they're not being inhabited year round. There could be categories that we could see if they exist in our city. Anyway, just some thoughts.
Tim, do you?
I have some opinions.
I'll bet you do. Okay, let's hear them. And then I want to ask Tom a question about.
I like the spirit of this. I think we need to take some action. The things that are important to me, first of all, I hate it when people don't pay their taxes that they owe, either to the state, right? So not number one, but high on my list is people who are not paying, the correct rooms and meals tax to the state. That's a big thing for me. Second of all, we can't get our hands around two things, which is short and long-term rentals, because we don't have a rental registry, right? So to me, I'd love to see them both combined, short and long-term, because then we have the opportunity to make sure that all rentals are safe and fire inspected, right? So in Burlington, if you have a rental unit, it has to be inspected every X years, and they check a lot of things: electrical safety, fire safety, whatever else is required in their rules.
Railings, all sorts of things, yeah.
So, well, railings sometimes are Section 8 more than they are, non-Section 8. But they have a lot of rules, right? So you have to if heating system, whatever it is, right, to make sure that the property is safe. And I know that we've been told by the fire department in the past, like in 2017, that they regularly looked at Craigslist. I'm dating myself, right? For people who were starting to rent out their homes. Let's say they were moving to a new home, they didn't sell their old home in South Burlington, so they rented it out. And they would contact them and say, if you're going to rent it out, you have to have hardwired interconnected smoke detectors, and they all have to work. If you don't, you'd be liable to be fined, because you can't do that. So the same situation appears obvious to me, whether you're a short-term or a long-term rental unit owner, right? Like even if, to me, I mean, I don't know if this is correct, but if I'm renting out 3 bedrooms in my home, you know, on a weekend for Airbnb or whatever platform it is, that home, because your people are paying you to stay there, your home should have hardwired interconnected smoke detectors, period, right? I mean, if they're wireless and that's acceptable, which I think it is to the city, nonetheless, they're hardwired and they're interconnected, right? And that's really important to me. So 1 is safety, 2 is registration, 3 is affidavit, and 4 is taxes, right? And I think if we had that ability, then that would give us the stake in the ground to say now we can go start squeezing on how many units you may have, or whether you could do a whole house as short term. I mean, obviously they're going to do long term. I mean, there are lots of long term rentals in the city right now. Go look at East Terrace, right? And they're all UVM students there, and all Spear Street, you know, close to the university, and other, you know, places as well. So, I think it's and then the next question is, then how much do we charge in order to fund the work that has to be done by the city, because it's going to need need person power to do it, right? So I'm concerned about that cost, but. So, I mean, a lot of the things in here you have about, like, you know, whether or not dogs are allowed, I mean, you know, to me, that's,
I think that's a staff issue too.
yeah, we could,
Site.
yeah.
Well,
I
I
don't
think
know,
some of
maybe
them are more related to the owner willing to have animals or not.
That's their choice.
You know, I don't think
yeah.
the city ought to be saying,
Okay.
you may not rent to anyone who has an animal. A
Some
dog or
cities do.
something. I know, I
Yeah.
just think that's goes a little beyond what a city should be.
But the concept of somebody, let's say, I mean, just, you know, arbitrarily, a single person is barely able to buy a duplex on their own, right? And they're employed, right? But they count on the income from the other unit to pay, let's say, taxes, you know, or property taxes or whatever, right? Or help with a mortgage. So, to me, if a person occupies and really does occupy and live in a unit in a multi-unit building, depending upon that limit of number of units is, I think we should not disallow them from having short-term rentals there if that's what they want to do, because that's their own personal, you know, residential, you know, building. So let's say it's a duplex, right? You know, I don't want to encumber them too much by denying them the ability to have a short-term rental if they live in one of the units and the short-term is next door, or if it's inside their own house, right?
Would you limit that just to duplexes? Because
Well,
I'm
saying,
just thinking, if they can hardly live, who's going to be able to afford a fourplex, live there, and then rent the other 3? I mean,
so
that's a business.
exactly. So then where, and I mean, the country is full of examples where when Airbnb was booming and residential real estate property prices were not that high, they were like going to the bank and getting loans and buying individual properties to add to their monopoly board, right, to extract large amounts of income, which is the American way. I have no problem with that. But, you know, in our situation here, that ends up pulling a lot of, you know, real estate out of long-term rental or possibly sales for, you know, long-term occupation, and that's part of our housing problem, right? So.
Well, I would agree. I would like to look at it. I think there certainly is a cost. I like the connection with a rental registry. I know that's expensive, but I think there are some safety issues that go, you know, beyond our ability to ensure that, you know, we don't have a lot of house fires or something because they're not maintained, the electrical systems, etc. I also wanted to ask Tom, Megan shared with us the Dartmouth study that was done at the behest of the legislature. I don't know if it was the House or the Senate or both. And I was just curious, Tom, if you think that's having, because it certainly is related statewide, I think, to affordable housing. And I'm just curious if you've heard anything about where that might be going.
No, there's a lot of focus on affordable housing, but I have not heard any rekindled interest in a statewide rental registry. And what I would say is I echo everything I heard Councilor Barrett say, and I've long, for the last 5+ years, stated that I support a rental registry in South Burlington, the city our size. We need to get a handle on our rental stock with all of our aging inventory for all the safety reasons, as well as the enforcement of collecting the appropriate taxes. But I always come back to safety. I remember walking many neighborhoods in South Burlington and rental properties that were not up to a standard, to a code that I would expect a commercial property to have to maintain. So to answer your question, Councilor Reilly, no, I haven't heard any renewed interest. I can ask about that this week, but I've had a busy week and I haven't done so. But I would definitely support South Burlington pursuing a rental registry. I do have some concerns similar to what you raised, Councilor Reilly, which has to do with prohibiting pets. And I think there was another one on here, the not allowing the entire home to be rented out. I think that nuance needs to take more time and consideration. But I certainly support a rental registry for the city of South Burlington.
Okay. Well, one of the, as I read the report from Dartmouth, I think it was the Dartmouth one, they did suggest that, you know, this was requested or paid for or something by the legislature in the sense of a statewide kind of way to address this issue. But one of their conclusions was, you know, their communities are so different, and what might work in South Burlington or what South Burlington or Rutland or whatever need is very different than, you know, Barnet. So, you know, I think rather than go the route of a statewide, unless the state wanted to come up with some examples or options for communities and do some of that legwork for communities, I think it would work better if each community came up with the solution for them, looking as Megan did at what other communities have done, and getting feedback from them about what worked. I'm sure they could tell us what also didn't work very well or had the unintended consequence, and develop something of our own. I think, and maybe that's where you have to go, Tom, with the rental registry, because it doesn't sound like the state's going to do it. But and I kind of understand that, because the communities are so different. So it makes sense to do something that is focused on the ability, the money that a community might have to invest in that kind of tool. But I do think it's important, and I would, you know, love to have the Jesse comment with, you know, can you come back with when can we do this, or what might it look like, or how complicated is it, with, you know, some things that maybe we can start small and go towards some bigger solutions, you know.
Sure.
And starting already with our LDRs, I mean, we have a lot of homes that are already out of compliance. They're not on 1 acre lots. The
Right, that's
owner
true.
doesn't live in the residence. You know, there are already a lot of people who are out of compliance. If 70 is our number in 2019, I would be surprised to learn that number wasn't close to 70 of people who are out of compliance. Yeah,
possibly.
So this is really helpful. The conversation is great for us to understand how we focus our efforts and what the interest of the council is. So we're more targeted and more focused. You know, I think you've heard me say before, I'll say it again, you know, I think the real policy magic and making these types of policy decisions real is the staff education and enforcement angle. I mean, Megan, you're bringing up a really good point about enforcing our current LDRs. We're not enforcing them, so of course they're not going to work. And how do we? So there's that initial hurdle to get over. How do we currently enforce what's on the books, and then get over the what else are we going to add with an enforcement team? So I think linking those two is I think staff will be very responsive to that concept because we also like to enforce the rules that are on the books. You know? So I think this conversation is great. I guess I would suggest that this is a conversation, with all due respect, Councillor Chittenden, to bring back to you, give us a month, 6 weeks to start putting together some high level ideas and bring back after town meeting day. So it's a new council. Anything we do here is going to require future elected officials to really weigh in on ordinance changes and budgetary decisions and whatnot. So involving them from the beginning of the conversation, other than this conversation, I think would be really useful. So with your head nods, happy to bring it back to you after our kind of orientation council meetings after town meeting day.
That would be great. Is that okay with you, Tom?
Sounds good.
Sorry.
Well, no, I think he appreciates that. I mean, we're not going to get it done by March, so. Okay. Well, thank you, Megan, for doing all that legwork. It was good reading, and I think that's,
Yeah, and
That's a start.
thanks to John Burton, who gave me those studies, actually, the Dartmouth and the Washington, D.C. studies.
The anecdotal stories I've heard about those short-term rental, one particular platform, is that people are getting turned off by the first price they see for per night, and then when they check or when they finally go through the reservation process, when you add in the cleaning fees, I mean the number just blows way up.
right.
And now hotels are like going, nah, because really what you see on that price is what you pay when you check out. If you don't add anything else, or if you don't
Right.
add parking on top, whatever it is, but because I'm telling you, the numbers I see, it's $150 a night, $600 for 2 nights. Well, the cleaning fee was $200 for what? So there are changes happening in that area as well, and I think that it's not as. I think the shine is worn off on some of those platforms in some areas. So.
Okay.
Can I make a
Yes,
personal
you certainly
policy
may.
statement that has nothing to do with my job? I think as our community shifts and changes to a more rental community, I think we're going to see that tipping point within the next comp plan, where right now we have the majority of our residents who are living in owner-occupied homes or single-family or duplex homes, and I think we're going to see, or townhouses. And I think we're going to see that shift into the majority of our residents living in multifamily rental homes. I think we as a community need to think really intentionally about how all of our residents are participating in our community and are valuable to our community. We have lots of staff and lots of volunteers and lots of people who participate in city things that are renters. And I think that it's easy to go to the voices we hear who are all homeowners and privilege that. And I think we really need to think broadly about privileging all of our residents regardless of their home ownership status. And so I think focusing on this kind of conversation on short-term rentals and a rental registry enables us to think about the safety of the entire community and not those who are just able to rent in an Airbnb in South Burlington, but really think about all of those residents who we are trying to keep connected to our community and productive and healthy and happy and all of those things. So I really like that pairing. Thank you.
No, I think that's very good. I think it's important to connect it to the comp plan as one of the potential values of how we see our community as a safe place to live. So, great. Okay, item 17, opportunities for counselors and the public to share information and resources on climate change. Does anyone have anything to share?
I already shared mine.
You did. Megan, do you have anything?
I'm heartened that we're looking at ecosystems in the state. I was glad to hear that update. that we're looking at ecosystems in state, because I think that,
In space?
no, in the state, in the state of Vermont. That's okay. That would be.
Exactly.
Yeah. But because I think that, there hasn't been enough attention focused on how our ecosystems are really the basic kind of living blocks to our civilization. I was thinking as we had our two chiefs, really struggling with overtime and employee, hopefully not burnout, but definitely fatigue. As we were talking about investing open space funds and, all of those zeros, I could just imagine, if I were the two chiefs sitting there and seeing the zeros. So I think it's important for us to think in that long-term way, that our health as human beings really rely on there being open space and ecosystems that are intact and thriving. I certainly don't want to, say that life will end. But I don't know that I want to eat protein pills to get through the day either. I think that quality of life and just what people value, going out and, seeing a tree and a blue sky, that these are things that add to the quality of our lives. We can subsist on, just eating vitamins and protein tablets and not have to get our food from nature. But I'm not so sure that that's the future we should invest in. So I know that, that we have a lot to balance, and we certainly are asking the voters to think very carefully as we put forward the budget, that we must invest in public safety, knowing that we are also, I think, looking to do something that's very holistic. We are looking, at various priorities that will have short-term payoffs, but also long-term payoffs. So that's why I appreciate the state legislature really looking at ecosystems, because we take it for granted. We truly do take it for granted. And I know that we've been talking about population growth in this country and in the world for a long time, but I think ecosystems has to be brought up there in terms of, it's not just taking land away from tigers and lions, it's taking land away from the whole web that makes sure that we have healthy and meaningful lives. So.
Okay, well, thank you. Is there any other business? Okay, we need to consider a possible executive session.
Yes, I would move that the council enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the negotiation or securing of real estate for purchase or lease by the city of South Burlington, inviting in Jesse Baker and Colin McNeil.
Second?
Is who?
Alana.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Will Tom be following us in electronically? Okay.
Yep, that's just send me a link.
Okay.
Okay, this is an early meeting too. All right, we will not be coming back with any announcements, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the meeting can adjourn. Thank you very much.